Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I had been hoping Kim would see things clearly ever since we met. Like many people in love, I often wondered why she would want to be with me. Deep down, I felt like I didn't deserve her. Over the years, I created many reasons in my mind for why she might leave me. Each time I thought of a new reason, I added it to the list in my head. That Friday afternoon, we came home after being away for work the whole week. Kim worked for a well-known auction house and had just returned from Zurich, where she was checking paintings for their next big sale. I had been in northern England, working on a project to restore an old manor house. I drove back just in time to pick her up from the airport. As we drove the 30 miles to our cottage, she was quiet. After she took a shower, she joined me on the patio to enjoy the last warm sunlight, playing with a glass of wine, a clear sign that something was bothering her. I knew she would eventually tell me what was troubling her. Finally, in a voice that barely broke the quiet, she said, "I'm pregnant." Those two words should have filled me with joy. But then she added, "But I'm not sure it's yours." Those 6 extra words felt like a heavy weight on my heart. I didn't know what I had expected to hear, but it certainly wasn't that. I sat in shock, then stood up and walked to the edge of the patio, staring into the fields. I tried to wrap my mind around what she had said, hoping I had misunderstood her. "What are you saying?" I managed to ask. She placed a hand on her stomach. "I'm saying I was with someone else when this baby was conceived." I hadn't misunderstood. My legs felt weak, and I returned to my chair, lowering my head, unable to look at her. She continued to twirl her glass. I felt frozen, trying to comprehend her words. I had feared this might happen long before, ever since Kim agreed to go on a date with me. I always thought she would realize her mistake and choose someone else, but I had hoped her honesty would mean she would tell me if her feelings ever changed. The silence stretched on until she finally said, "Say something. Anything, Ben." "What is there to say?" I replied, sadness creeping into my voice. "You've just ruined what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life." I should have been yelling, but I wasn't. I spoke in a quiet tone, accepting the reality between us. I raised my head and looked at the beautiful woman across from me. Her nearly white hair framed a face I could imagine seeing in a magazine. Her blue eyes looked back at me, filled with tears. "I have been expecting something like this for years," I said. "I worried you might leave, but I never thought you would be so unkind by telling me this." "I'm not moving on with him," she replied. "There's a chance the baby is yours, not his. I care for you too much. But you were with another man when we were trying to have a child. It doesn't seem fair. Why tell me? Why not just leave and spare me the pain of knowing?" I interrupted. Her voice trembled. "I had to tell you. I don't know for sure, but I wanted you to know. If it is your child, you'd have known when the baby is born." I glanced down at my hand, understanding her better. "He's not like you at all," she said softly. "He's very different." Without looking back, she added, "If I knew it was his for sure, I'd have chosen a different way to handle it. But if there's a chance it could be yours, that's different. I want your baby." The weight of her words struck me. Kim had grown up with strong beliefs about family, and for her to even think of another option was hard to accept. "And if it turns out to be his, where does that leave us?" I asked. "I'll be asking for your forgiveness every day until the baby is born." Her words made my expression harden as I replied, "I thought I was the luckiest man when you agreed to be with me. I have never felt worthy of you, but I won't raise another man's child." "Who is he? He's nobody." "Well, he seems to have been quite involved," I shot back. "What will you do if it turns out to be his?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I cannot raise another man's child," I said firmly. "You need to tell me who he is." Kim didn't answer. She fell silent. I decided to leave her alone with her thoughts. I went inside the home we had built together, seeking a quiet space to think. I needed to figure out what to do next. Yelling at her felt pointless. What was done, and we both had to find a way to deal with this situation. Confronting the person responsible was also on my mind. Kim was the girl everyone admired. She was popular and had a charm that made her stand out. I was just Ben, always feeling like I didn't belong. Although I had my own friends and interests, I had never thought someone like Kim would be interested in me. We both studied human history. She was focused on art, while I was interested in medieval history and architecture. We met in a class on medieval art, and I got to know her there. I arrived early to get a good seat, hoping to blend in with the rest of the students. The room filled up quickly, and when Kim walked in, she smiled and took the last seat next to me. "Hi, I'm Kimberly," she whispered. "Ben," I replied softly, feeling my cheeks grow warm. My attempt to stay unnoticed had failed as the lecturer caught our exchange. I opened my notebook, nervously playing with my pen. The lecturer started to talk about the importance of religion in the Middle Ages and how it showed in the artwork of that time. I couldn't help but think about the interesting woman sitting next to me. After the lecture, she said goodbye and left quickly, only stopping briefly to grab her course materials. This pattern continued for the next few lectures. Kimberly would come in just as the lecturer began and slide into the seat beside me. I enjoyed her pleasant scent and often imagined a warm hug. The lecture hall was older, and there wasn't much space between the seats. The first time we sat together, we kept a respectful distance. The next time, our legs ended up touching more. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want her to get the wrong idea. I thought about moving to a different seat, but I found comfort in being close to her. On that day, it was clear our closeness wasn't planned. As she sat down, her shirt shifted, and her leg brushed against mine. It was a warm day, and I felt the gentle contact. Throughout the lecture, there was a friendly closeness. By then, she had told me to just call her Kim. She said, "My friends call me Kim, and I hope we can be friends too." Since we met, she would wave and smile at me in the hallways. One afternoon, we shared a nice hour at the coffee shop. Then one of her friends called her, and she left, still smiling, which made me feel good. That day was different. It had rained, and both of us were in jeans. I could still feel warmth from sitting close together. Once the lecture finished, I closed my notebook. I expected Kimberly to hurry off again, and I wanted to ask her if she'd like to grab a drink, but she didn't move. When I began to speak, she placed her hand on my arm. "Could you wait just a moment for the others to leave? I have a question for you," she said, and I settled back in my seat. A few minutes later, we were alone. She leaned back and looked at me with a thoughtful expression. Then she surprised me by asking me to stand up and turn around slowly. After getting over my surprise, I did what she asked. When I faced her again, she smiled widely. "I need your help," she said. I hesitated and asked, "What? How?" I know it wasn't the most clever response, but I was caught off guard. She chuckled softly. "Sorry, I could have explained that better." I tried to give her an encouraging smile and sat back down beside her. "Ben, I've been earning some extra money as a model for the art department. None of my friends know about it, and I'd like to keep it that way. Last week I was supposed to model with another person, a man, but he made me uncomfortable, and I had to step away. After that, we had to pose separately, which wasn't what the class needed. I thought I'd lost the chance, but the teacher was understanding. She told me to find someone I felt comfortable with." She looked at me shyly but hopefully. "Okay," I said carefully, trying to gather my thoughts. "And you want me to suggest someone?" She smiled and shook her head. "No, I want you to do it with me. You have the right build for this, and the students will enjoy how we look together." She placed her arm next to mine. "Yin and yang," she smiled. I was taken aback. Was she really asking me to join her in front of a group of students? She patiently waited for me to reply. "When?" I finally managed to ask, feeling a bit nervous about being in front of her and a group of strangers. "Tomorrow evening, from 7 to 9:30 in the art building. Does that work for you?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Great! I was hoping you would," she said, looking relieved. "Why don't we meet in the student bar at 6:30 and walk over together? We get paid £20 an hour for our work, so you can take me out for a bite to eat later." I didn't feel I had much choice. Kim had a way of pulling me into her plans. The next evening, I walked into the student bar, waiting nervously for Kim to arrive. I sipped on a drink to calm myself. Following her advice, I wore loose sweatpants and a baggy t-shirt, feeling a bit awkward. They prefer we don't have any visible lines from our clothing, she had explained. But you should bring something nicer to change into later. A girl's got to have her standards, you know. I don't let just anyone take me out. She had walked away, leaving me amazed by what was happening. I was about to take the most beautiful girl I had met out. Kim walked through the door 15 minutes later, and the place went quiet as people admired her. She wore a flowing skirt that showed off her legs and a loose blouse. I stood to greet her. To my surprise, she stepped closer and gave me a friendly hug. She smiled at me, and her hand brushed by my waist. "Good. You chose a comfortable outfit," she said in a playful tone. I nodded, and then she took my hand and guided me as we walked together, feeling her warmth beside me. She confirmed her playful mood, saying, "Let's go." I finished my drink, and we walked to the art building, not knowing what to expect. Kim led me to an office where we signed in, and the woman at the desk gave me a look that made me blush while Kim smiled. "We'll need to check out again to get paid," Kim said. "Come on. There's a room next to the studio where we can prepare." She took my hand again, leading me to the second floor and showing me the empty studio. A row of easels stood in a circle around the room, and in the center was a raised platform with a padded bench. "Our throne," I joked, trying to calm my nerves. Kim laughed, saying, "A throne for the emperor and his new clothes." It took me a moment to grasp the reference, and I grinned to show I understood. She pointed to the changing room, and I offered to let her go first. She laughed again. "In a few minutes, we'll both be on that bench. I don't think it matters if you see me getting ready." She gently nudged me and followed me into the changing room. Once inside, I stood still for a moment. There were a couple of chairs, a table, and a few lockers. Hanging on a rack were several cozy robes. "Shall I go first?" Kim asked, and without waiting for an answer, she turned away to prepare herself. She placed her blouse on a chair and faced me again. For a long moment, I could hardly breathe, having dreamed about her beauty before. Now I was looking at her in the mirror, and she was truly stunning. She cupped her hands beneath her arms, checking her reflection. "Do you think this side looks different from the other?" she asked earnestly. I cleared my throat and felt my cheeks get warm. I don't think so." She looked back at herself and nodded slowly. "I think you're right, but we often see our flaws more than others do." Later, I realized she was trying to help me feel comfortable, and it worked. She stepped away from the mirror and neatly set aside her skirt and blouse. When she turned to me, I noticed a gentle blush on her cheeks. "So what do you think?" she asked, gesturing to herself. I had said earlier that Kim was beautiful, but that didn't really capture it. She was tall and graceful, with long hair that was almost white. Her oval face framed with the brightest blue eyes and a cute nose made her even more charming. Kim smiled shyly at my compliment. "Your turn," she said softly, sensing my unease. She stepped closer and took my hand, putting it on her shoulder to reassure me. "Don't worry, I won't bite." She smiled warmly. She helped me take off my shirt and glanced at me approvingly. "You know, you're quite handsome yourself. The only thing is that you're a bit shy," she teased lightly. Then she pointed towards the door. We could hear people moving around in the studio, reminding us that time was short. "We have about 5 minutes before class starts. I need to tell you what will happen," she said, grabbing a robe from the rack and putting it on. She handed another robe to me with a comforting look. I nodded, feeling a bit self-conscious but grateful for her kindness and the robe's warmth. We sat down, waiting to be called. "The teacher's name is India," Kim said. "She'll be setting us up for the class. No one else can help us. Usually I hold 2 poses each class. The first one lasts over an hour, then we get a 15-minute break before the second pose." I suddenly felt nervous. "Will I know any of the students?" I asked. "I doubt it," she replied reassuringly. "They're all graduate art majors. Don't worry, they are serious artists and very professional." Just then, a woman with gray hair entered the room. We stood up and Kim hugged her and then pointed at me. "India, this is Ben. Isn't he perfect?" India looked me over thoughtfully and then asked if I could remove my outer garment. I looked at Kim, who nodded, so I handed the robe to Kim as India continued to observe. Please stand beside him, Kim, India finally instructed. Kim stepped over, putting her arm around my waist and resting her head on my shoulder. You were right, Kim. It creates a lovely contrast. Can you hold the pose for the students? I hesitated, then nodded. Okay, let's start then. Kim picked up our robes and we put them on for the short walk to the platform. While India spoke to her class, she arranged Kim and me on the bench, using cushions to support us. She placed us in a relaxed pose as if we were just resting together. I lay on my back, turned slightly towards Kim, who faced me, her head on my shoulder. I was focused on staying still, feeling the warmth from her side. India adjusted our positions a little to find the right angles. We remained quiet as the class sketched. The only sounds came from pencils and India's soft instructions. My head was propped up enough for me to glance at Kim beside me. Her calm breathing helped me stay calm. I could feel her gentle movements where we touched. After a while, Kim whispered softly, "Are you falling asleep?" I replied, "No. I was just curious why you asked me to do this. As silly as it seems, I feel comfortable around you." I could have asked others, but they would have wanted something in return, and I didn't like that. "So you're okay with going out with me later?" I asked. "If I hadn't asked you, I don't think you would have found the courage to ask me." She paused, then added, "I've been hoping you would for a while. I thought you had plenty of friends." I felt her head give a tiny shake. "Not really. There are many who'd like to think that. I haven't been looking for anything serious, so I keep things light with a few of them." That didn't sound great, but I had to ask. "So what are my chances if I asked you out?" I asked. She shook a little, trying not to laugh. Finally, she whispered, "Dummy, what do you think we're doing after this? You're taking me out to eat after we're done here, and to me, that's a date." Now it was my turn to try and not laugh. "So we're doing this first, then going on a date." She couldn't hold back her laughter and had to apologize to the students. India looked at the clock and suggested we take a break. She asked us to stay where we were for a moment, and I heard a click from a camera. I noticed Kim tense and saw India waving a photo to help it develop. "Please stay still for a moment and don't worry," India said. "I'm just using this to help you after the break. This is a great pose, and the students want to keep drawing you like this." The camera made a few more sounds. "I'll give you the photos when we're done," India told Kim. Kim got up and stretched before putting on her robe. She handed me mine as I sat up. I followed her into the changing room where she gave me a water bottle. "Don't drink too much and maybe go to the bathroom before we go back," she suggested. She took her advice, drank some water, and opened a door on the other side of the room. I heard water running. Then she came back and I took my turn. After that, we returned to our spots on the bench. India adjusted us again, looking at the photos. Once she was satisfied, she picked up our robes, making sure we saw her put the photos in the pocket of Kim's robe. The studio grew quiet as the students settled back into their work. I whispered to Kim, "I can't believe you're so at ease with everyone looking at us. I'm still a bit shaky." She replied, "I've always felt comfortable in my own skin. When I was younger, my mom would chase me to get me to put on clothes." I could sense she was trying not to smile at the memory. "Honestly, I'm still like that," she whispered. "It's one reason I do this and model part-time. It helps me earn some extra money." "What kind of modeling do you do?" I asked. "Anything that pays. Usually I do catalog work, clothes, swimwear, that sort of thing, but I've also done some work for professional photographers. Nothing too extreme, though." I haven't heard anyone mention that before. You wouldn't have. I keep this part of my life private. A few close friends know that I model, but that's it. The people I usually hang out with wouldn't care about an art class. "But you're telling me? I trust you." I felt a warm glow from her words. "What happens in the art studio stays in the studio," I whispered back. "You're silly, but thanks," she replied with a little laugh. We both relaxed, and I think I dozed off for a while. Kim's breathing slowed, and I thought she'd fallen asleep. We both started to wake up when India clapped her hands and announced the end of the session. The room suddenly buzzed with noise. We stretched and got ready to leave. Kim smiled at me as she straightened her outfit. I had a clean pair of black jeans and a blue shirt in my bag. I returned her smile while I got dressed. "Looks like you're going casual," I said. "I forgot to pack clean underwear," I admitted, feeling embarrassed, and she laughed. India knocked on the door and walked in. "Good. I caught you before you left. I want you to see some students' work. I think you'll like it." Half the class remained in the studio, leaving their work on the easels. I was impressed, and I finally understood Kim's strong belief about how well our differences would look together. The drawings ranged from simple to very detailed. In each, there was a strong sense of connection between the two subjects. I heard Kim whisper, "Wow," and I could only agree with her. "I'm glad you like them," India said. "Ben, I know you only did this as a favor for Kim, but I hope you'll come back for the next few classes. The students want to pair you for a series of paintings." She looked at me, hopefully, and I glanced at Kim, who was smiling. "Sure," I told her. I wasn't sure how the evening would go, but India's request gave me a reason to see Kim again. Kim took my hand and said we needed to sign out in the office to get paid. She wanted to visit a popular wine bar and restaurant in the town center. It wasn't my usual place, but being with her was perfect. We caught a bus and walked the last bit. The waitress greeted Kim warmly, recognizing her name. We were shown to a table away from the busy area. The waitress gave us menus and took our drink order before leaving. Now that I was sitting at a table with one of the most admired girls in our year, my anxiety returned. Suddenly, it felt too real, and I was unsure why I was there. I felt like just another face in the crowd. I was sure Kim only noticed me because the seat beside mine in class was the only open one. I expected her to start the "let's just be friends" talk when she leaned closer, surprising me with her friendliness. I paused, then relaxed into the moment. After what felt like forever, we separated, and she sighed softly. I wanted to do that all evening. I looked at her carefully. I felt the same way, but was she just playing with my feelings? I was nothing like the guys I thought she usually dated. She glanced at the menu and said, "You aren't my usual type," which confirmed my worries. "What's your usual type?" I asked. She opened her mouth to answer, but paused, thinking. She played with her drink and said, "I was going to give you a simple answer, but you deserve more." I raised my eyebrows and she smiled. "I know you might think I'm shallow, but I've been one of the popular girls since school. I've never really had to look for a boyfriend. I could choose from many, but none of them would have made me feel the way you do. I don't think you're shallow. It's just that you always seem to be surrounded by people. I don't think I've ever seen you alone." She frowned and said, "My grandma also had a saying, 'You can feel the loneliest, especially in a crowd.' It wasn't until I started here that I understood her meaning." The waitress returned, and we placed our orders. After she left, I struggled to make sense of my thoughts. "Kim, I don't understand why you'd be interested in me. Compared to the people you hang out with, I feel like nobody. I love being here with you, though. And I'm happy to be here with you, too. Do you think I just happened to sit beside you in class? I waited by the door to make sure no one sat next to you. I think I'm the lucky one." I didn't know how to respond. For the past year, I'd admired the girl sitting across from me from a distance. She seemed so out of reach. I thought tonight was just a fortunate accident. Now it felt like it might have been planned. Kim held my hand and said, "Of all the people I know here, you're the only one I feel good about being with. Many women would love to go out with you. I want to claim my spot." Our food arrived, and we ate and talked about light topics. I think both of us wanted time to reflect on how we felt. We caught the last bus back to the dorms, and I walked her to her building. In the hallway, I wasn't sure what Kim expected me to do. She didn't wait. She closed the distance and hugged me. On my usual dates, this is when I'd come up with an excuse to not go any further, she said. But with you, I hope you'll ask me to come up so I can say yes. She seemed full of excitement. Why? I asked, unsure of her intentions. Can we go upstairs and I'll try to explain? I nodded and she led me to her room. It looked almost like mine, with similar furnishings. The bathroom door was slightly open and the room was dim. In the middle was a desk, chair, drawers, and a bed. But Kim's room had her personal touch. Soft decorations softened the hard edges, and the walls were filled with photos and art, many of her and some artistic. In the corner was a real beanbag chair with a stack of books beside it. It reminded me of happy childhood moments spent reading. Kim quickly gathered some laundry and tossed it into a basket before sitting at the edge of her bed. I considered sitting in the chair, but she patted the bed beside her. When I sat down, she said, "You asked, why you?" I'm not lucky with relationships. My first boyfriend was like the guys I dated. He was the first one my father liked. He was good-looking, fit, and came from a wealthy family. Everything I'm not, I pointed out. He was a real loser, not like you at all, she said, and shook her head. No, you are so much better. Ever since I could date, I needed my father's approval before going out. Handsome, athletic, and from the right families, that was the only kind of boy I was allowed to date. I looked at her in surprise. But your father isn't here, so why do you still date the same type? Because he checks in on me every few days, she said with a slight shrug, and he knows the parents of many boys I've dated. How do you explain your other interests? I pointed to the photos and artwork on her walls. I don't mention it to him. He doesn't know I model for the art department. My mother knows about the life modeling, not the other things. He's never visited your room? What, come see his daughter? No. He likes to control our lives from a distance. My mother visits every couple of weeks and tells him what he wants to hear. So to answer your question, I date the type of guy he approves of to keep him happy. But where does that leave me? As you said, I am not what your father wants. I've had enough of doing what he wants. I told my mother about you when she visited last time, and that I wanted to ask you out. She smiled big and said, I found a way. She laid back down on the bed and pulled me down beside her. I admired her lovely face, unsure of what she wanted. She slid her hand behind my head, pulling me closer into a warm hug I had longed for all evening. We enjoyed a moment of closeness before drifting off to sleep. I realized that if I had asked for more, she would have gladly responded. But I was still so confused. Was Kim interested in me, or did she just want to help with my modeling assignment? I mentioned my uncertainty, and she smiled, saying, I like you a lot, but I won't pressure you. You can stay. I'd be happy if we just held each other while we slept. So I spent the night in her bed. She changed into something comfy and curled up on me. While Kim slept soundly, I fought to stay calm. I had been falling for her since the start of the term. My mind raced. Was I just a distraction? Or was she just expressing her independence? The clock radio woke me in the morning. I was startled, unaware I had dozed off. A cheerful voice was selling car insurance, and then a familiar song started playing, echoing my worries. The problem is all in your head, she said. The answer is simple if you think about it. I want to help you feel free. There must be many ways to move on. It wasn't that I wanted to leave Kim, but I felt she would soon find reasons to question our bond. The song was ending, and the last lines repeated in my mind. Slip out the back, Jack. Make a new plan, Stan. Just listen to me. Hop on the bus, Gus. You don't need to talk much. Just drop off the key and set yourself free. But Kim didn't slip away or make a new plan. For the rest of the term, we grew closer, enjoying our time together until that last week. I was booked to model for one of India's advanced classes. It was just me, as Kim was modeling for a sculpture class on the floor below. We planned to meet up afterward for drinks with classmates. India's class ran late, and by the time it wrapped up, it was past 9:30. When I finally made it to the office to sign out, it seemed Kim had already left. Did Kim leave a message for me? I asked the secretary. She shook her head. No, her old boyfriend was waiting for her, and they left together just a few moments ago. Boyfriend? I rushed outside and spotted Kim in the distance, walking away with a man. When they stopped under a streetlight, I recognized him as someone who had been around a lot last term. I realized I hadn't seen him recently, and I wondered if that was why Kim had spent so much time with me. Uncertainty gripped me, but I followed as they walked toward the parking area. They stopped near the entrance, and I moved close enough to hear their conversation. The man said, I get what you're saying, but I'm only telling you what your father told mine. He's heard rumors about you spending time with someone. I explained that he was only helping me with my art project, but I was beginning to doubt that was the truth. You can believe me or not, that's up to you, Martin. Ben is just someone who's been helping me with my art project. It's nothing more. So we're good for tonight? I'm here, aren't I? Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Her words sent a chill through me. This was what I had feared since our first meeting, a line from a song playing in my head. Slip out the back, Jack. Make a new plan, Stan. All my worries seemed to be confirmed. I was just a pit stop in Kim's life. It looked like Kim had made a new plan. She noticed me and caught my pale face before I turned away and hurried off. I briefly returned to my room where I had already packed most of my things into storage for the summer break. It took me just a few minutes to finish up. I locked the door behind me and headed out. I made it to the station just in time for the last train. My phone chimed with a text from Kim. I deleted it and turned off my phone. My parents expected me to spend the first week of summer break at home, which I dreaded due to my difficult relationship with my strict mother. She had always been the strong one in our family. My father was once a mid-level manager at a bank, but was impacted by the financial collapse in 2008, retreating to his workshop and often avoiding the outside world. My mother became the family's breadwinner, often reminding my father of his lesser role. I overheard her telling him that the only good thing he did was bring them me. "What about Ben?" he'd replied. "He won't accomplish anything, unlike Olivia." That summed up my family life: a strong mother, a self-centered sister, and a father who had given up. When Kim learned about my family, she felt sorry for me, suggesting we take a trip before our summer internships. Kim's father had secured her a position at an art museum, while I was heading to Devon to help restore a 16th-century manor house. I arranged an internship by myself, without my mom's help. I decided to call the head of the restoration company and ask to start as soon as I could. He agreed to let me begin right away if I accepted a project in Ireland. I said yes, and 2 days later I was helping a stonemason clean and fix some limestone beams. The estate was in a valley and near a small village. Most of the people there worked on the estate and its farm. The restoration team included skilled craftsmen and volunteers like me. The owner had inherited his father's title and the old estate. He was in the middle of a 5-year project to restore a large manor house. As a smart businessman, he had found ways to cut costs, and internships like mine were part of that plan. Interns received a place to stay, meals, a small payment, and course credit. In the weeks that followed, I had a routine: morning lessons with the master artisans and 6 hours of work in the afternoon. In the evenings, the 6 interns, whom we jokingly called indentured servants, would walk to the pub in the village. The local beer was good and affordable. There were 2 women in the group, but any chance of summer romance faded when I found out they were together. Cell phone service was poor, so I didn't bother to turn my phone back on. I tucked it away in my backpack. I had no idea if Kim was trying to reach me, convincing myself that I was just a passing interest for her. I tried to distance myself from her, even though it hurt. I had thought she was someone special. A month later, I began to feel better about myself. Watching the building change with my hands was fulfilling. My fellow interns were no longer just faces. We had become close friends. Kim felt like a distant, bittersweet memory. So I was surprised one night in the pub when Dave looked over my shoulder and whistled softly. "Look at that," he said. "I hope she's alone." I started to turn, but Dave said, "Don't look yet. She's checking us out." He sat up straight, a handsome and confident guy trying to get noticed. He waved and grinned. "Looks like I still got it." Just as he stood up, someone placed a hand on my shoulder, and a familiar scent reached my nose. "Hi, Kim," I managed to say calmly. I didn't need to see her. There was only one person I knew who could make me feel that way. Kim sat in the seat that had just been vacated and said hello to my friends before focusing on me. I felt frozen, holding my drink tightly. She placed a phone on the table. "Do you recognize this? I know you have one. It's called a phone. Why is yours off? I had to wait for your mom to get back from her trip before I could find you." "What are you doing here, Kim?" I asked. "I heard what you told your boyfriend. You said I was just a friend and nothing more. I thought I was just someone to fill the space while he was gone. I wish you had been honest with me." "You are wrong. You were never just a backup. All you had to do was wait, and I would have explained everything." I gave her a doubtful look. "You were making plans for your dinner with him. Why would I want to hear about that? The dinner was with him and his parents. I didn't even know Martin would be there since he had left the term before. He showed up just as I was leaving class and was waiting for me outside. His parents were in town, and I was expected to go with them. I couldn't say no because Martin's parents were good friends of mine. and they always invited me to dinner. So why didn't you wait for me after class? I was just one floor above you. At least you could have left me a message. Martin wouldn't leave me alone, and I couldn't let him know about us. He would have told his parents, and my dad would have found out the next day. I quietly asked the secretary to let you know I had to leave. I was about to respond when I noticed everyone was watching us closely. The 5 people sitting with me were quietly paying attention to our conversation. It felt like half the pub was trying to listen. "Let's talk outside," I said, standing up. Kim quickly got to her feet and followed me to the pub garden. "Ben," she said as soon as we were outside, "I never meant for you to hear what I said to Martin. He showed up unexpectedly, and I told him what he wanted to hear to keep our relationship private. I didn't want my dad to know about you until I was ready. Martin was my first boyfriend, and my dad still thinks we are perfect for each other. What's changed? Why are you here?" The simple answer is that I love you. When I saw you on the steps, the look on your face made me want to hide. The secretary was supposed to tell you I had to go because of a family issue and that I would see you later. Instead, she told you my boyfriend had picked me up. So why didn't you come after me? I wanted to, but just then Martin's parents arrived. I shrugged, unsure of what to say. I still couldn't forget how convincing the secretary had sounded when she said Kim had left with her boyfriend. Kim took my hand gently and led me to a bench. "It became strange after that," she said. "Strange how?" "When we got to the restaurant, my parents were there waiting for us. It was the first time I had seen both of them together at the university. Usually, it's just my mom." Was that strange? Not really. I felt like something was happening that everyone at the table knew except me. What surprised me was what happened at the end. She shivered and shook her head. "I still can't believe what they were planning." The food and service were great, like the restaurant was expecting a celebration, but I felt out of the loop. Both sets of parents seemed to be enjoying themselves, but Martin looked nervous, like he had something on his mind. At the end of the meal, after the plates were cleared, a bottle of sparkling cider was brought out. Then Martin got down on one knee, and as our parents softly applauded, he proposed to me. "What?" I looked at her hand, but there was no ring. I couldn't believe it. The whole evening was set up. I had never shown my parents that Martin was anything more than a close friend. I learned later that my marriage to him was part of a business deal between our families. They wanted our businesses to merge, and my marriage would secure that deal. I was expected to be the perfect daughter, smile, say yes, and be happy. Did you say yes? You can be quite foolish. I didn't agree with them at all. I stood up, poured my glass of cider on my father's head, told them how I felt, and left. They were so sure I would say yes that they had already put an engagement announcement in the newspaper. It was in the paper the next morning. I thought you had seen it, or someone had told you that is why your phone was off. I turned it off because I didn't want to talk to anyone. It doesn't really matter, though. This place has terrible reception, Kim said, looking at her phone and seeing the no connection sign. "Oh, but that doesn't explain why you're here," I said. "I came to say I'm not engaged because I worried that's what you thought happened. I'm really sorry about what I said to Martin, and I love you." "The problem is all in your head," she told me. The song was right. All my fears were in my head. Kim was sitting next to me, sharing her feelings. She was the girl I had always dreamed of, and I loved her so much. But she seemed so much better than me. She took my hand and squeezed it. "Say something, Ben. Say you still love me." "I do," I managed to reply. "Thank goodness. I thought I had lost you. You won't regret that." I didn't regret it then, not for a long time. When we told our families we would get married, we had to talk about it with our parents. My mom was surprised by Kim's intelligence and beauty. For the first time, she saw potential in me. Kim's father had some trouble when Martin's father pulled out of their deal. My mom helped him find a new business partner who turned things around. However, this change pushed Roger's role in the company to the side, and as he saw his power fade, he grew resentful of me. After college, we both found our dream jobs. Kim worked for a big art auction house, and I was a junior partner at an architectural firm that restored old buildings. A year later, we bought our first home. a small 3-bedroom cottage that needed a lot of work. We thought about having children, but decided to wait until we were more stable. A few months ago, we decided it was time, and Kim stopped taking her birth control pills. Kim often said how happy she was with me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she might change her mind at any moment. This brings us back to the news she had for me. The mood between us was heavy that evening. Kim wanted to talk, but I couldn't face her. Knowing she had been with someone else hurt deeply. I was also troubled by the thought of her possibly being pregnant with another man's child. That night I moved to the spare room. I barely slept and heard her come to the door a few times. I pretended to be asleep. In the morning, I found Kim sitting at the kitchen table looking exhausted. Her eyes were puffy, and she seemed upset. I made coffee, and she watched me closely. I poured us each a mug and sat across from her, taking a sip. Since learning the truth the day before, I knew I needed time to think, and that wouldn't happen if we were both at home. "So, how do we handle this?" I asked. "Should I move out, or will you?" "Neither, but if someone has to go, it should be me," Kim said. "Good," I replied, trying to settle the matter. "Are you ready to tell me how this happened and who he is?" "No, let's just say it was a mistake and knowing who he is won't help." I banged my hand on the table hard enough to make my coffee spill. "So, I'm supposed to accept that you could be having another person's child without any questions." Kim flinched as I expressed my frustration. "You don't get to make that decision for me, Kim. You've always said our marriage is a partnership with no secrets, and now you drop this on me." "I know, but this is different. Knowing who it was or why won't help," she said quietly. I shook my head, confused. "Are you serious? How naive do you think I am? It might not help, but I want to know, and you have to tell me, or you can leave." I leaned back and stared at her. Her distress showed. "I can't tell you who or why," she whispered. "So I'm just supposed to accept this?" I replied. "You want me to not question it?" She sat still, tears streaming down her face. "I meant what I said yesterday. I can't accept another person's child, so let's find out if this baby is mine or someone else's." She nodded slightly. "I checked. There's a way to know if the baby is yours," she said. "There's a test that can be done in a few weeks with a blood sample from me and a cheek swab from the father." She pointed to a padded envelope on the counter that I guessed contained the test kit. "But the problem is that by the time I could have results, you would have known I was pregnant." This explained why she had felt the need to tell me the day before. She couldn't hide it from me much longer. Time was running out, and she didn't know who the father was, so she was out of options. "We will do the test as soon as possible, but what will you do if I'm not the father? We'll figure that out after we get the results. I need to know what you plan to do now. I can't tell you what I don't know. It's all based on the test results." "No, it's not. If it's not mine and you decide to keep it, I can't see how we can move forward. You need to decide now." Kim looked uncertain, twisting a piece of her hair around her finger. "Are you willing to tell me who he is and why you were with him, or are you planning to leave?" She swallowed several times before saying, "His name is Michael Schmidt. That was a common name where he was from. Well, I had a name, and it didn't matter how common it was. I would find him." I noticed a slight pause when she said his last name. I thought Schmidt was like Smith in German. Either she picked a random name, or it was his real name, but I needed to know why. "Are you going to tell me why, or is it what I suspected you're moving on?" She was quiet, but she didn't have to say anything. My old fears came rushing back, reminding me of the pain I felt. After a few minutes, she finally spoke. "That would be moving down, not moving on. I told you years ago that you were the only one I would ever love." "So what changed?" I asked without thinking. She took a sharp breath. "Nothing has changed. I made a mistake that I regret. I trusted someone I thought was a good friend, and things spiraled out of control." "And is Michael Schmidt this friend?" I asked. She looked at her empty coffee cup and shook her head. "No, the friend was the one who set up my meeting with Michael one weekend. This helped me figure out when it happened. She'd only been away one weekend in the last couple of months. She had gone to evaluate an art collection in Liechtenstein that the owner was thinking of selling at auction. That weekend was the only time everyone involved could meet. Next, I needed to know who this friend was. What kind of friend would do that? I questioned. Someone who isn't a friend anymore, she said bitterly. Who are they? I pressed. She paused and then replied, I never said it was a man, and it doesn't matter who it was. I will never talk to them again. The sad part is, I thought she was a good friend. She looked away. Sorry, that sounds confusing, I said sharply. I noticed she was being careful not to reveal details about this friend and had stopped short in her sentence. I wondered if this friend had some influence over Kim. You want me to deal with the results of your choices, I said, shaking my head. That's not happening. If this marriage can survive, you need to identify who I can hold responsible. She turned pale and struggled to respond. I wasn't about to back down, and I still had doubts about our future, so I continued. While you think about that, what will you do if the baby isn't mine? She instinctively put a hand on her stomach, and that simple act told me our chances were slim. She was determined to keep the baby no matter who the father was. I cared for her, but dealing with this was too much. I stood up to refill my coffee, trying to organize my thoughts. Kim interrupted my thoughts. I don't know what I'll do besides praying that this baby is ours. And what do you think the chances are? It's all I've been thinking about since I found out. I believe there is a good chance. We shared close moments every night before I traveled and again when I returned. My doctor thinks I might have been pregnant before I left, but she can't be certain. And how many times while you were away? She looked away, as if she couldn't face me. Twice, she said quietly. I was careful the first time, but I can't be sure about the second. Why did you do it? I thought you still cared for me. I do. It's not your fault. It's all mine. So you say you still love me, yet you traveled with another man? I didn't travel with him. It was a work trip with a colleague. I didn't know who would be there, and it was the only time I met him. I was told a representative would be present while I assessed the art for auction. My colleague was there to check the condition and see if it needed any work. Michael introduced himself as the representative, but that turned out to be false. The art belonged to him and his family. She stood and walked around the room, pausing by the garden door, staring out for a long time at the distant hills. Then she straightened up and looked more confident. Could you get me another coffee? She asked, her tone suggesting she wanted me to comply. Let's sit outside, and I will explain what happened. I'm fighting for us, so I'll tell you everything. She stepped outside, leaving me at the kitchen table. That was a smart move. My anger was building, and I needed a moment to calm down. I made a fresh pot of coffee and found some biscuits to put on a tray, letting my thoughts wander while I worked. Kim seemed ready to explain, as if sharing her story would ease my concerns. I wasn't keen on discussing someone else's child, but I was willing to listen. I joined her on the garden bench and set the tray on the table. She filled our mugs and took a biscuit, looking at me. It's a long and awkward story, so please let me finish before you judge me, she said. She took a deep breath and began. It started in my first year at university, before I met you. I was exploring parts of myself. It was the first time I was living away from home, and I rebelled a bit against my strict upbringing. How does this tie into our situation? I asked, confused about why she was starting so far back in time. It does. Just let me explain, she insisted. I decided I wanted to know what it would be like to be with women, she said, giving me a brief smile, which I acknowledged. It was a way to stand up to my father, who has strong opinions against it and often uses mean words. I wanted to challenge him. And did you? I asked, trying to remember if I had ever heard my father-in-law mention anything about this topic. What do you mean? Tell him or be with women? Both, I guess. I never found the courage to tell him I was interested in women. But yes, I had a few relationships with women that year. The first was a girl from my class, but most of my time was with Simone, a French artist who wanted me to model for her. I shared my feelings with her, and she guided me, and I developed strong feelings for her. I tried to remember if I had met Simone but came up blank. Kim seemed to notice my confusion and added, she was one of the artists in that first class we modeled for, the beautiful brunette who left after the first semester. By then, we had become good friends. Now I could picture a face in my mind. Was she the one I thought looked like a character from a fantasy story? She nodded. That was her. I would never have guessed you two were close, I said. I thought you only dated men in university. That was my plan. I wasn't sure how serious I was about being open to women. I enjoyed connecting with them, but I also dated men. I was trying to keep both options open, using dates with my friends, especially Martin, as a cover. I was sure my dad would hear about anything I did with him, and I used that to my advantage. But being close to Martin backfired. He thought I really liked him, which is why my parents thought I would accept his proposal. We paused, reflecting on how that moment had set the course for our future together. Just as this situation seemed like it might lead toward a split, I had chosen to listen, so I sat back and sipped my coffee, waiting for her to continue. By that time, I had met you and realized you were the person I wanted to be with forever. But my father was still a problem. I couldn't tell him how I felt about you because he would have tried to keep us apart. So, I kept saying you were just helping me with an art project. It was only when you left that I saw how silly I had been. I know all this. Why talk about it again? You asked. What I never told you was that the day after that dinner, I opened up to my parents about my feelings for women over the last year. Then I mentioned meeting a man I felt comfortable with and was starting to care about. I explained that if they tried to separate us, I would step back from them and share my truth with our family and their friends. I had no idea about that. After Kim helped me during a tough summer, she took me to meet her family. While it wasn't perfect, they were friendly enough, and now I understood why. It also brought up another question. Are you still exploring that part of yourself? Kim paused and looked at me. Not in that way. I'm still interested in women, she said. Honestly, if I ever thought about being with someone else, it probably would have been a woman. It seems like you moved on from that, so it sounds like you've thought about it for a while. No, that's not what I meant. You're misunderstanding me. I'm saying that a woman would have had a better chance of attracting me. I've never really been interested in relationships with men. But I didn't mean to be unfaithful, and it was a significant mistake, she emphasized. So, where is all this going? Sometimes I meet a woman who meets my expectations, and I feel that warm feeling again, but I haven't acted on it, she insisted. In what way does this relate to our situation? A year ago, a woman started working at our Zurich office. She met all my expectations a long time ago. I interrupted. Are you saying you've been involved with someone else? No, she said quickly. That's not what I'm saying. It was Simone, my close friend from university. After finishing school, she returned to France and became an art restorer at a museum, painting in her spare time. Now she runs our Zurich restoration department. I was happy to see her again. We kept in touch over the years through emails, but we hadn't seen each other for over 6 years. I was confused about how this connected to the matter at hand. And she was really glad to see me and as friendly as ever. She's in a serious relationship and introduced me to her partner, Helen. The three of us would go out for dinner and drinks whenever I was in Zurich. I thought of both of them as good friends. I even considered inviting them over for a weekend so you could meet them until the trip to Liechtenstein came up. What happened? I asked again. A client had contacted the auction house about selling some of his art collection. He wanted Simone to be part of the evaluation team. She was the one who suggested I be included. My job was to research the history and authenticity of the paintings, making sure none were stolen, and come up with a price estimate. Simone would check the condition of the pieces since any needed repairs would affect my pricing. I thought it was a good idea when she suggested we take a weekend to review the art together. We would drive to the site on Friday afternoon and spend Saturday working on it. If we needed more time, we could use Sunday morning and head back to Zurich in the afternoon. Everything seemed reasonable. I was told that the contact we would meet was named Michael. Yes, the same Michael. It turned out he and Simone were old friends. Simone suggested we use her car. Usually, I prefer not to rely on others for transportation, but this time I agreed, and that became part of the problem. The drive was only a couple of hours. The art was at a secluded estate that looked like a castle. She glanced at me and added softly, I think you would find the architecture interesting. I grunted, not liking how she was trying to change the subject. Kim hesitated and continued. On the way there, Simone was eager to talk about our time at university. I knew she had told Helen we were close friends, but I had never really shared about my relationship with her. We mostly talked about mutual friends and, of course, you. Kim paused to sip her coffee. It felt unusual. She kept bringing our friendship back into the conversation, talking about how much she enjoyed our time together. It wasn't until afterward that I realized she might have been testing me a bit. We shared stories about old friends and relationships. She wanted to know if I missed being with women, and I had to remind her that I was happily married. Then she started reminiscing about a trip we took to Cornwall with a German student named Kurt, whom she had known from school. "When did that happen?" I asked. "It was before I met you. Simone and I hadn't been together long, and she was trying to encourage me to be more open. I wasn't sure I was ready, which limited what we could do in public. The weekend was meant to help us connect better and see if I was ready to commit." Why was he there for what was supposed to be a weekend for the girls? I wondered. Because Simone wanted our relationship to grow. She wanted me to understand that being in a same-sex relationship didn't mean I couldn't have connections with men. I hadn't realized she was bi until then. We ended up spending the night together, and I must admit it was enjoyable. "What happened to Kurt?" I asked before I caught myself. He wasn't the one who had hurt me. "Oh, he went back to Germany after the weekend. While it was fun, he had a bit of an arrogant attitude, thinking he was everything women wanted. I only knew him as Kurt. I never learned his last name." I wasn't sure how much more I could take. I wanted to know why Kim thought it was okay to engage with this Michael person, which felt like a huge blow to our marriage. Instead, I was hearing a story that felt so distant from reality. "Where is all this going?" I asked, feeling frustrated. "I think I've heard enough, and if you keep going, you'll need to decide where you want to be." "Ben, please let me finish. Then if you still want to, I can find somewhere else to stay tonight." I shrugged, not sure of what I wanted. I just felt a big emptiness in my chest, and instead of lashing out at her, I had no idea how to fill that space. I couldn't imagine ever hurting her. Kim took my shrug as permission to continue. "After that weekend, Simone wanted us to find another person to hang out with, and I was okay with that. But I told her I wouldn't consider anyone I usually spent time with. None of them would be able to keep it a secret, and my father would hear about it. After I turned down her ideas, she asked me to think of someone. You were the only person I would even consider." I was stunned. "I don't understand." "You never mentioned this to me. I didn't even know you were interested," I said. "That's because it was more Simone's idea. We weren't together anymore when I finally got a chance to ask you out. After our first date, I didn't want to share that moment with anyone else," she replied. "But it sounds like she didn't take long to convince you to think about it again." "No!" she almost shouted. "That's not what happened. So what did happen? How did you end up with this Michael guy?" "I don't know. It just happened." I sighed, feeling frustrated. But that's not really an answer. Before we arrived at the estate, Simone told me we were meeting her old friend Michael and that I had met his brother. I asked who, and she said he was Kurt's older brother. She talked about her time with both of them, how wonderful Michael was, and how she and Helen enjoyed several weekends with him. "So you wanted to see for yourself?" Understanding clicked in. She shook her head, insisting, "I know it looks that way, but that wasn't my plan." "But that is what happened, and now we're having this discussion." She paused, clearly thinking carefully about what to say next. "It is true, it happened, but it doesn't explain why. I thought she was warning me about her relationship with Michael so I wouldn't feel like I was betraying Helen if I saw her with him. At first, Simone talked about staying at a nearby hotel, but then she decided we should stay at the estate." I could see where this was leading. Suddenly, I felt uneasy about hearing how our marriage had become so troubled. The need to know why she seemed drawn to Michael now felt pointless. She made her choices, and we had to live with those results. "Does any of this really matter?" I said bitterly. "You're pregnant, and we're not sure if it's mine. You chose to revisit that weekend with Simone and Kurt's brother." She raised her voice again. "No, that was never supposed to happen. I thought Simone was a good friend, yes, one I had a history with, but that was it. When we got to the estate, she seemed like a different person. She warmly greeted Michael and introduced me as the auction house's art expert and her old friend. 2 months before, Simone had hurried from her car to greet a tall man waiting at the steps of the building. She laughed and embraced him. "Michael, great to see you again. It's been too long." She then called Kim over. "Kim, this is my dear friend Michael Schmidt. This is his family's home. Michael, meet Kimberly, one of the best art experts I know." Michael acknowledged Kim with a friendly gesture. "So this is the famous Kimberly my brother has fond memories of," he said, speaking English with a slight accent. Then he turned back to Kim and added, "I'm glad to meet you, but you'll have to make do with me, as Kurt's away in America for work." Kim felt uneasy, thinking about what Simone had put her in. She didn't want to relive the weekend with Kurt, especially not with his charming older brother. She looked at Simone and then said to Michael firmly, "I am only here to advise you on which paintings to sell. What happened with Kurt is in the past, and I don't want to talk about it." She turned to Simone, frustration clear in her voice. "What did you tell him about me?" Michael intervened, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "Nothing I didn't already know. My brother described that weekend with you as one of the best times of his life. When Simone said she was bringing an expert to evaluate the paintings and mentioned your name, I asked if you were the same Kimberly Kurt had met. When she said yes, I was excited to finally meet the woman who had such an impact on him." Kim felt her frustration rising. Her earlier concerns on the drive were being confirmed. "Well, it was not memorable for me. Your brother was challenging, and so are you if you think you'll have a special weekend." She then addressed Simone directly. "I don't know what you were thinking, but this won't work. I can't mix business with personal matters." Simone grabbed Kim's arm, trying to hold her in place. "Please, Kim, let me explain." Michael misunderstood. "I told him you were happily married." She glared at Michael, who took a step back. Kim pulled away from Simone, saying, "Is this why you insisted on driving your car? Are you trying to keep me here? You know I can't stay." Michael spoke again. "It's not Simone's fault. It's peak tourist season, and the local hotels are full. I suggested that you use the guest house." He pointed to a small building nearby and continued, "I apologize for the misunderstanding. I was just eager to meet the woman who meant so much to my brother." Kim reflected on her reaction and recognized she had overreacted. Plus, leaving now could put the sale at risk, and she doubted the auction house would be happy. "No, it's my fault. Kurt didn't make the best impression, and hearing about his memories was hard for me." Michael and Simone smiled, and he added, "I understand how it must have sounded. Let's get you settled, then we can discuss the paintings." He signaled, and a well-dressed servant appeared from the building. "Emile, would you show the ladies to their rooms?" Without waiting for an answer, he turned to the women. "Emile will show you to your quarters. Shall we meet in an hour in the library? Simone knows where it is." After agreeing, Emile attended to their bags. Simone locked her car, and they followed him to the guest house. The guest house was nicely furnished, and they were shown their rooms. Kim paused, looking at the displayed artwork, most of it decent quality but nothing special, except for one landscape on the staircase landing. She recognized it as a work by Richard Wilson, an early British landscape artist, though she did not recognize the subject. She thought it was one of his earlier pieces. Their rooms were beside each other, sharing a bathroom. Kim settled into her room and sat on the bed, waiting for Simone to collect her. While she waited, she reflected on a fun weekend spent with Simone in a rented cottage that Kurt had unexpectedly joined. She had enjoyed the time they shared without anyone looking over her. She remembered being annoyed when Simone said that Kurt's brother would be joining them. When Kurt arrived, Simone greeted him warmly, but Kim had initially ignored him. The tall, blond man quickly charmed her, and she began to warm up to him. After a nice evening at the local pub, Kim and Simone shared a bedroom, staying up late talking and laughing. Kurt slept on the sofa, which Kim knew was not what he expected. The next day changed things a bit. Kim had enjoyed one too many drinks at lunch and decided to go for a walk to clear her mind, leaving Simone and Kurt to clean up while they talked. Kurt often spoke in German with Simone, a language Kim didn't understand, making her feel out of place. She must have walked longer than she meant to because it was getting dark when she returned. Kim lay down next to Kurt, feeling the warmth as he rolled her to the side. She was squeezed between them and felt a lingering connection from earlier. A playful moment occurred when Simone smiled at Kim. "I love this. Kurt is as good as his brother," she said. Kurt playfully replied, "Not better. Can he keep two women happy like this?" Simone laughed. "You're just the icing on the cake. Kim is the main course." Kim felt a stronger connection to Simone than to Kurt. Kurt joined in their fun, letting the two women enjoy each other's company while he supported their laughter. After a couple of hours filled with joy, hunger led them to the village pub for dinner. Away from the energy of the bedroom, Kim's thoughts about Kurt returned. His rude behavior towards the pub staff and his belief that he would share a bed with her bothered her. Kim didn't like public displays of affection, and Kurt's behavior made her uncomfortable. After moving his hand from her thigh again, Kim had enough. She asked Simone to join her in the restroom. "I'm sorry, but either he goes or I'm leaving. This was supposed to be our weekend," she told her friend. "It is ours. I thought you'd enjoy having Kurt join us," Simone replied. "I did, but not with him," Kim said firmly. "I agree he's not great. It's too bad his brother isn't here. He's much nicer," Simone said. "He was my first crush. Maybe we can find someone we both like back at school?" Kim nodded but pointed out, "That doesn't fix this problem. He's your friend. What will you do?" "I'll make sure he sleeps on the sofa. If he doesn't like it, he can leave. I've had my fun with him. Now it's time for us again," Simone assured her. She followed up with a kiss that left Kim feeling flustered. When they explained the sleeping arrangements to Kurt, he got upset and left angrily. The women enjoyed their last night together until they fell asleep peacefully. A knock on her door woke Kim from her thoughts. She got off the bed feeling flustered, as memories of her time with Kurt and Simone lingered. Taking a couple of deep breaths, she called out, "One moment, please." She went to the bathroom and splashed some cold water on her face. After changing into fresh clothes, she felt better and called out, "Come in." Simone entered. "Are you ready?" she asked. Kim nodded and approached her. "Why didn't you tell me who Michael was before we got here?" "I said he was a good friend," Simone answered. "But not that he was Kurt's brother." Simone looked thoughtful. "I know things didn't go well with you two, but I thought you had fun that weekend." The start was nice, but he was quite full of himself, and it quickly became annoying. It felt like he wanted too much praise. Simone chuckled. "That's true, but he certainly has talent." She hugged Kim, and Kim felt surprisingly comfortable. "Why do I feel like you're going to say Michael taught him everything?" Kim said with a slight smile. "I'm not sure, but Helen and I have shared some great times with him." "You still like bringing friends into the mix?" "It adds excitement to the experience, as you should remember," Simone replied. Kim thought about their previous evenings together, where Simone was energetic, but Helen was quiet. She wondered if Simone's habit of introducing new people into their fun had caused some tensions between them. That weekend had brought stress into her relationship with Simone. She shook off the thoughts and focused on getting through this weekend, completing the assessment of the paintings, and heading home to Ben. "Shall we get started on what we're here for?" Kim said to Simone. "I just want to look at these paintings and leave." Simone looked a bit disappointed, but led the way across to the main building and the library, where Michael was waiting. He greeted them, then turned to Kim. "Kim, I need to apologize for any misunderstanding. I was pleased when Simone mentioned you would assess the art. I was eager to meet the person who left such an impression on my brother." "I gather that feeling isn't mutual," Kim replied coolly. "I'm here for one reason only, to assess the paintings you want us to sell." Michael's tone turned formal. "It's von Schmidt if we're being formal," he countered. "That's fine. I'm Mrs. Anders," Kim replied sharply. Michael glanced at Simone, surprised. "You didn't say she was married." "I didn't think it mattered," Simone said. "Kim is only here to help you with the artwork, not to get involved in personal matters." Michael raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Ladies, let's not get sidetracked. I apologize if I made you think there's more to this weekend than there actually is. I just need you to help decide which paintings we should sell and their expected value." Simone added, "I also apologize. I shouldn't have mentioned my weekend with Kurt to Michael. I didn't know he knew. I enjoyed my time with Michael, but I never meant to include you in those discussions." Kim felt her anger fade as professionalism took over. She followed Michael and Simone into a long gallery that spanned the building. Windows on one side let in natural light, while mirrors on the opposite wall reflected it. 50 to 60 paintings were arranged between the windows, and several antique tables held sculptures. Below the artwork were rows of old dining chairs. Kim guessed this room had once been used for formal meals. Michael pointed to the walls and said, "I'm not sure how much Simone has told you, but the family needs to sell these paintings for at least 35 million euros, ideally 50 million if possible." Kim looked closely at the few paintings she could see from her spot. They were nice, but none were special enough to fetch more than a couple of €100,000 at auction. She walked further into the gallery, and the quality of the art improved. She looked at several smaller works by known artists, ranging from older styles to Impressionism, but nothing was from after the 1920s. After she had seen about a quarter of the collection, Michael asked for her first thoughts. "You will need better pieces than these if you want to reach your goal." "These aren't good enough?" "There are some decent pieces, but I haven't seen anything outstanding yet," Kim replied honestly. "What I've seen so far won't raise the amount you hope for." She waved towards the paintings she had already viewed. "On a good day, those might bring 3 million at auction. If the rest are similar, maybe 12 to 15 million at best." Michael frowned. "I had hoped for something special among these." Kim shrugged, and Simone joined her to look at more paintings. They took their time and found the collection to be impressive overall. Any gallery would be happy to showcase them. Besides a couple of beautiful portraits of a serious couple by the Dutch artist Jan Verkooy, which might sell for 2 million each. The rest were similar to the first ones she had assessed. The two women discussed their observations and called Michael over. Kim said, "Even if you auction every painting here, I doubt you would make much more than 15 million after fees." Michael turned to Simone. "Do you agree with her?" She nodded in response. Michael looked disappointed. "I hoped they would be worth more. It's getting late. Let's eat while I think about my options." After their meal, Kim returned to her room, leaving Simone and Michael to talk. Later that night, when she went to the restroom, she heard noises coming from Simone's room that suggested they were having a good time together. In the morning, the two women had breakfast together in the dining room of the guest house. Simone seemed cheerful, wearing an eye-catching top. "What are you going to tell Helen about last night?" "I don't want her to think it was me," Kim asked. "Don't worry. She knows I'll be with Michael when I see him," Simone said confidently. "So she won't be surprised. But I have to admit, he was very eager last night." Kim sighed. "I could be wrong, but I didn't see anything remarkable. I checked the sculptures too. They might add a couple of million on a good day, but that's about it." "Exactly. Look, Michael will show us more of his family's collection today. He couldn't show us yesterday because he needed his father's permission first." "Why?" Kim asked. "Because there are disputes over the ownership of some pieces." Kim's expression changed. "If the art has been taken unlawfully, we can't get involved. Let's go." "The pieces are fine," Simone assured her. "Michael says they've been in his family for over 100 years. It's just that a distant branch claims ownership of some." Kim felt a little better, but still kept her guard up. She had access to the latest data on stolen artwork and regretted not checking anything yesterday. However, she remembered nothing seemed off. She decided to double-check later. "You know we can't deal with items in dispute." Michael said he'd clarify later. It's about a family inheritance issue after the First World War. The courts have sided with his family, but there have been several appeals. They want to avoid unnecessary conflict. "All right, let's go see what he has then." It turned out that Michael would not be available until the afternoon and didn't want them to look at the pieces independently. Instead of wasting the morning, Kim and Simone returned to the gallery to confirm Kim's earlier opinions. Kim took the time to review the database for stolen artwork again and found nothing concerning. They noticed a few paintings in the corridors that caught her interest, but nothing truly valuable. During lunch, Kim checked several art websites for mentions of any disputes about the von Schmidt family's paintings, but found nothing. Later that afternoon, Michael brought them to a small room displaying 6 paintings. It was a cozy area kept for family use. On a desk in the corner were family photos. Kim noticed several pictures of Michael and Kurt, but her main focus was still on the paintings. When Michael turned on the lights, Kim gasped. She recognized 3 paintings by Pierre-Auguste Renoir, which she had seen in his catalog before. All 3 were marked as being in private collections with unknown locations. The other paintings were good, but not as impressive as the Renoir. Kim felt excited and had to hold onto a table to steady herself. "Have you seen these before?" she asked Simone, pointing at the paintings. The other woman shook her head. Kim tried to calm her enthusiasm and looked at the remaining paintings, with Simone following suit. Although none was signed, their quality showed the artist's skills. Under bright light, they examined the paintings closely. Eventually, they stepped back to discuss. Simone said, "I think these 2, pointing at portraits of an older couple and a woman with a child, may be by the same artist. I think you're right, but I don't recognize the artist. They could be from Rembrandt's studio, but not by him. They are very well painted, but need some cleaning and restoration." "They do. What about the last one?" "The third painting showed men around a table in a tavern. It's also Dutch, maybe by Dirk Hals." Michael interrupted their conversation. "What kind of value could we expect?" "Any one of the Renoirs could easily hit your target even after auction fees. I assume you have full history on these." "We have for the Renoirs and that one," Michael said, pointing to the piece Kim thought might be a Hals. "My great-great-grandfather bought them in Paris in the 1890s. Our lawyers have all the paperwork." "What about the others?" "Ah, the Rembrandts may pose a problem. My great-great-grandfather's brother married into a well-known Dutch family, and the paintings were part of her dowry. Sadly, the couple passed away in an accident just 6 months after their wedding. Since they didn't have any children, the woman's family claimed the paintings still belonged to them and should be returned. However, the man's younger brother, who inherited his estate, disagreed. The matter went to court, and the decision was in their favor." "I don't think those are real Rembrandts," Simone said honestly. "They might have come from his studio, but I doubt he painted them himself." "But we were always told they were," Michael replied. "I understand," she said, "but the way the paint is applied doesn't match his known works. It's probably from one of his students." Michael turned away from the paintings. "Which one is the most valuable?" Kim pointed to a large painting showing a family having a picnic beside a stream. It was the biggest of the 3. "That one," she said. "I would suggest a starting price of 40 million, and I think it could sell for even more." She walked over and stood in front of it, quietly admiring the work. She gently touched the face of the young girl in the painting, feeling drawn in by its detail. The emotions it stirred were deep. When Simone rested a hand on her shoulder, it felt calm and reassuring. "That one, then," Michael said. "Does it need any work?" "Just a gentle cleaning," Simone replied. "The fireplace smoke has darkened the surface a little." Though Michael had made his choice, he let Kim and Simone spend more time with the paintings. He called for Emile to bring a bottle of sparkling drink to celebrate. Kim felt lucky. Michael had given her permission to take the 3 Renoirs off the wall and study them closely. Emile helped her place them on a table. Michael handed her a full glass of the drink, and she thanked him with a nod, taking small sips between her observations. As time passed, her feelings grew stronger. She realized she was likely the first person to examine these works so carefully since they were bought years ago. After a long while, she straightened up and stretched, letting out a small groan as her muscles ached. Michael helped steady her when she felt dizzy. "Welcome back," he said with a light smile. "You seemed really deep in thought." Kim nodded, still a bit dazed. This had happened before when she lost herself in great artwork, but never quite like this. Simone led her to the sofa. They sat down and Simone gently massaged Kim's shoulders, trying to help her relax. Kim leaned back slightly, appreciating the support. Michael handed her another glass, and she drank it all. The warmth of the moment, the peaceful surroundings, and the beauty of the paintings surrounded her. Suddenly, strong feelings overwhelmed her, and she sat on the floor, tears falling down her face. Simone returned and found her crying. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. Kim pointed at a faint mark on her leg. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. Your friend and I were together. I stopped taking precautions a few months ago because Ben and I have been trying for a baby. Now I don't know what to say to him. I told Michael to be careful, Simone replied. Was he? And why didn't you stop this? Simone looked uncomfortable. I wanted to feel close to you again. Michael wanted to understand why Kurt kept talking about that weekend. I helped set things up, thinking it would distract you through the art. I thought it might bring something good. Kim shook her head. Well, it worked, she said bitterly. You knew how easily I get caught up in things, and now you might have ruined my marriage. I trusted you. She stood up and walked to the shower. If you want to help, get my bag and tell him to stay away from me. I'm leaving as soon as I can. Simone nodded and left. Kim turned on the water and cleaned herself quickly, trying to feel better. By the time Simone returned with her bag, Kim was ready to go. I can't stay here any longer, she said. I don't know what I might do if I do. Simone gave her a hug. I understand. I've already told him to keep his distance. We'll leave now. Kim got dressed quickly and followed Simone to the car. Her things were already packed. Kim sat silently in the front seat as Simone started the drive back to Zurich. After a long silence, Kim finally spoke. Why did you let that happen? You knew I didn't want it. I know, Simone said softly. I got caught up in the moment, too. I should have stopped Michael from pouring more drinks, but you kept holding out your glass. You know how I lose myself when I'm looking at real artwork. You could have been right beside me, and I wouldn't have noticed. She looked at Simone and saw her blushing. Please don't tell me you were... Simone cleared her throat. Not the table. The sofa. Kim looked away. So because you were with him, you thought I should be too? What am I supposed to tell Ben? Why tell him at all? Because we didn't use protection last time, and I'm not on anything. Ben and I have been trying for a baby. I can't take that risk. If you're worried, we can get you something to help. I can't. If I am pregnant with Ben's child, I won't take that chance. And if it's not Ben's? I don't know. When was the last time you were with Ben? Thursday night. I flew out Friday morning. Well, I know Michael was careful the first time. I'd have noticed. If you are pregnant, it's probably Ben's. He was with me this morning, too, and I don't think he was careful then. Why didn't you stop him? I wasn't fully awake. I thought it was Ben. I only realized later when I saw you beside me. They both fell silent as the car moved along the road. Even if things happened again later, Simone said slowly, Michael must have been tired. We had already spent a lot of time together, and after you went to sleep, I was still with him. But if you took care of yourself, things should be fine. I did, Kim replied. Then you'll be okay. No, I wanted you to understand why I broke every promise I made to you. I'm not trying to make excuses. I should have known better. I never meant to let you down, and it will not happen again. Sure, it won't happen again, I said with a touch of sarcasm. But you're overlooking the fact that you might be pregnant, and it could be his. Do you think I'm not aware of that? I'll take the test as soon as I can. If this baby is yours, I hope you know I never meant to get involved with anyone else. What happened was a mistake, and I hope you can forgive me. And if it's not yours, then what? Kim stayed silent for a long time. I watched her twist her hands together, something she did when she was very stressed. Then, she placed one hand on her stomach while reaching out her other hand to me. The look in her eyes made me take her hand. I will call the clinic on Monday and schedule the test, she said. You will need to make an appointment for your part. Are you getting a sample from him? She sighed. I don't need one from him. If it's not yours, then it has to be his. He's the only person I've been with since I met you. I don't plan to talk to him again. How can you not talk to him? What about the sale of his paintings? Kim smirked slightly and squeezed my hand. The auction house decided not to work with Michael's family after someone suggested that some pieces in that art collection might raise questions. The history of the Renoir is unclear. When his family bought those paintings, the gallery handled some controversial art. Michael's business really needed money to stay afloat, and this delay will harm their business a lot. I couldn't help but smile briefly. Even the thought that a painting could be linked to a troubling history was enough for any auction house to reject it. One problematic painting could ruin an entire collection. I shifted my focus back to the woman next to me. I stood up. "Kim, we're just going in circles. I will pack a bag and get a hotel room for a few days to give you some time to think. I will take your test, but remember, I will not help raise another person's child. If it's yours, then what? Then we will have the child we always wanted. But the real question is, will we have a marriage? I made one mistake, Ben. Is there any chance you could forgive me?" I paused to think and soon realized, under the circumstances, I could forgive her. Ever since I met Kim, I had expected something like this to happen, but I thought it would be because of her choices, not someone else's influence. The hard part for me was whether the child was mine. If it wasn't and Kim wanted to keep it, I didn't see a future for us. Yes, you might think that's shallow, but that was how I felt. Kim kept watching me until she finally broke the silence. "What will you do?" "That depends on what you decide." I hesitated and added, "I need time to think. There's a project in Ireland that needs my attention." I was supposed to visit next month, but it felt like the right time to go. "You can't just run away. We need to figure this out. You've had months to think about this. Don't you see that I need time too? How long will you be gone?" "A week or maybe 2. That should give you time to do your test. I'll leave my sample before I go." With that, I went upstairs to pack and make plans for my trip. The contractor was happy to know I could be there next week. I managed to book a flight for the next afternoon, but the mood in the house was tense. Kim cooked, but we hardly touched the food. That night, I noticed that Kim had left the bedroom door open, but I chose to sleep in the guest room for another night. The next day, I found Kim had gone out. There was a note on the kitchen table saying she went to visit her parents. Next to it was the DNA test kit in a plastic bag. I took the hint, swabbed my cheek, and put the kit back on the table. By the time I needed to leave, Kim had not returned. I wrote my hotel address at the bottom of her note and left. A cold wind whipped across the ancient Irish hillside as Ben trudged back from a late shift at the restoration site. The weather had turned bitter over the last couple of days, the sky a constant gray that matched his mood. He could almost taste the damp in the air, an earthy mix of moss and stone that clung to every breath. Despite the scenic spread-rolling green pastures, narrow winding roads, and century-sold farmhouses, Ben found no peace in it. His mind was trapped in a loop of anger, regret, and a sliver of fragile hope. He stepped into the cramped trailer that served as temporary housing for the junior crew, shutting the door against the chill. A single overhead bulb cast a harsh yellow glow on the small common area, which contained a worn-out couch and a rickety wooden table. The place reeked of stale coffee and wet boots. In the corner, Dave, one of Ben's fellow interns, was hunched over a blueprint of some old window frames they'd be restoring next week. Ben could barely manage a greeting. He tossed his jacket on the couch and exhaled a long breath. Despite the exhaustion in his limbs, he couldn't stop fidgeting. He knew the DNA test results would come in soon, maybe they were already in. The auction house had a top off-the-line lab partner, Kim had said. Everything should move quickly. But then again, time seemed to grind to a halt when you were expecting the worst. Dave, noticing the tension, paused his work. "Hey, bud, you all right? You look like you just saw a ghost." Ben forced a nod. "I'm fine. Just tired." "Yeah, well, we're all tired," Dave said, flicking his pencil aside. "But you look different, been looking different for the past week." Ben shrugged. He didn't owe Dave an explanation, especially about something so personal. But there was a kindness in Dave's eyes that made it hard to brush him off completely. "I've got some family stuff I'm waiting to hear about." Dave didn't push further. He just nodded in a way that said he understood that life had more twists and bruises than any old building they were patching up. Ben excused himself to the narrow bunk room he shared with 2 other interns. It was a cramped space with metal frame beds and battered duffel bags stacked in corners. The single tiny window offered a view of the rainy farmland. He flipped open his laptop, heart pounding as he waited for the screen to load. He'd turned his phone back on earlier in the day, ignoring the multiple missed calls from an unknown number that, deep down, he hoped was Kim. Instead of calling her back, he let them go to voicemail, too afraid to confront whatever news might be coming. But now he had no excuse. He needed answers. A single unread email glowed on his screen. The subject line was succinct: DNA test results. Ben's breathing quickened. He clicked on the email, scanning it so fast he almost missed the key part. Probability of paternity, 99. 9,999%. His vision blurred for a split second and he swallowed hard. The test said the baby was his. He reread it, just to be sure he wasn't hallucinating. Tears of relief, fear, gathered at the corners of his eyes. He set the laptop aside carefully, then pressed the heels of his palms against his temples. It was his child. The wave of emotion that hit him was so strong he felt nauseous. He had expected, or maybe even braced himself for bad news. Now that he knew he was the father, 100 new worries sprouted in his head. Was he even capable of forgiving Kim enough to build a family? How could he ever look at her again without picturing her with Michael? But also, did it matter? The baby was his. That changed everything and nothing all at once. He noticed a voice message on his phone, probably left just after the email was sent. With trembling fingers, he played it. "Ben, it's Kim. I wanted to let you know the results came in. You're the father. I wish I could see your face when you find out. I'm so sorry about everything, but She paused, sounding like she was holding back tears. "I love you. That's all I want to say right now. Please call me back." She hung up abruptly. The emptiness in her voice felt like a knife twisting in his gut. He powered off his phone again. He needed a minute or maybe several days to let this sink in. The next morning, the crew woke before dawn. Ben forced himself up and out, needing physical work to distract him. They had to fix a crumbling wall near the estate's entrance, an unforgiving job under the cold drizzle. Throughout the day, his mind replayed the news. It's mine. The baby is mine. By lunchtime, he'd barely focused on his task. More than once, he'd miscalculated measurements or hammered in the wrong place. Dave, noticing his distress, finally pulled him aside under a battered tarp where they kept supplies. "Man, you've got to snap out of it. This wall isn't forgiving and neither is the foreman," Dave said. His voice was firm but not unkind. Ben looked up at the stormy clouds overhead. "I got news last night. It's big. Want to talk?" Ben was silent for a few beats. He watched raindrops splatter into a puddle by his boots. "I found out I'm going to be a dad." Dave's eyes lit up. "Wow, that's huge, man." "Congratu." He stopped mid-sentence, noticing Ben's anxiety. "Isn't that good news?" Ben scoffed, crossing his arms. "It is, in theory. But my wife and I were not exactly on the best terms. There was another man involved. She wasn't sure whose baby it was." The words left a bitter taste in his mouth. Dave let out a slow whistle. "Damn, that's a biggie." He scratched at his stubble. "Still, if you know the baby's yours, doesn't that change things for you guys?" Ben swallowed. "I don't know. I've been imagining different outcomes for weeks, and now I'm stuck. Part of me is relieved. Part of me is furious. And another part can't stop thinking about that child and how scared I am of screwing up." Dave gave Ben a somber pat on the back. "Nobody can tell you what to do, man. You're the only one who can decide if you're going to let anger define you or if you're going to fight for your family. Just don't run away from it. Trust me." Ben stared at the wet ground again, feelings swirling inside him like the storm clouds overhead. That evening, a biting wind tore through the farmland as the men returned to the trailer. Mud caked their boots, and their breath lingered in white puffs under the flickering light by the entrance. Inside, Dave got a pot of coffee going while Ben collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion draping over him like a wet blanket. He powered his phone back on, half hoping Kim might have left another message. Sure enough, 3 missed calls, each from the same unfamiliar number. He decided to listen to the latest voicemail. "Ben, it's me again. I understand you might need space, but please call. I'm scared, and I want us to figure out where we stand. I love you." His chest tightened. He played it a second time, noticing how her voice cracked on the word love. Before he could overthink, he pressed the call button. It rang several times before Kim picked up. "Ben?" Her voice trembled with relief and tension all at once. "Yeah, it's me." He swallowed, trying to steady his breathing. I got the results." A pause. "I'm so glad you called." Outside, thunder rumbled distantly, but the trailer was oddly quiet, Dave having stepped out to give him privacy. "I'm sorry," Kim said softly. "I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. Every time." Ben cleared his throat. "So what now? Where does this leave us? You and me, and the baby?" "I want to fix things," Kim whispered. "I want us to be a real family. I'll do whatever it takes, Ben. But I also know I can't ask you to just move on like nothing happened." His throat felt dry. "I have no idea if I can let this go. But that baby is mine. We need to talk about everything. Not just the test result, but how we got to this point, and what it means going forward." Her exhale echoed through the phone. "Yeah, we do. Will you come home?" Ben considered it, his mind flashing images of her tearful face, the life they had built, the unborn child's future. "I'm not ready to come home," he said, voice trembling. "I'm staying here in Ireland at least another week or two. I need that time. I have a lot to figure out." He heard her sniffle quietly. "I understand." They stayed on the line, silent, as though too many words threatened to erupt. Eventually, Ben softly said goodnight and ended the call. For the rest of the evening, he gazed out the trailer window at the black sky, trying to gather the scattered pieces of his heart. The DNA results had removed one layer of fear, but exposed another. Could he learn to forgive Kim and himself for all the buried insecurities that had festered in their marriage? Sleep claimed him late, haunted by dreams of a faceless child calling out for him in a voice eerily similar to Kim's. A piercing autumn sun lit up Zurich's old town, making the pastel-colored buildings along the Limit River look almost dreamy against the crisp blue sky. Kim tightened her coat around her growing belly, still not visibly large to strangers, but definitely noticeable to her in the mirror. She navigated the cobblestone streets with quick, determined strides, heading for a small cafe near the Kunsthaus. The cafe's warm interior always reminded her of a childhood memory, with old wooden beams overhead and wrought iron lanterns by each booth. She needed the cozy ambiance today. She was about to do something she'd been dreading. Inside, the soft murmur of German and English conversations hummed around her. A barista greeted her politely in Swiss German, and she ordered a mint tea, then slipped into a corner booth. She glanced at her phone. 2:05 p.m. Simone was late. Kim's emotions whirled. This meeting wasn't about rehashing the intimate mess that had brought her so much guilt. It was about laying down some boundaries. Permanent boundaries, she thought bitterly, remembering the first time Simone had introduced her to Michael. And though Simone wasn't the sole reason Kim cheated, Kim blamed herself more than anyone. Simone had clearly guided her down that destructive path. On some level, Kim needed to confront her old friend to break free from the secrets and illusions that had nearly ruined her marriage. The door jingled. Simone stepped in, wearing a sleek black turtleneck and tailored pants. Her wavy brunette hair was pinned back, highlighting sharp cheekbones that gave her an aristocratic flair. She spotted Kim and headed over with a guarded smile. "Kim," Simone greeted, sliding into the booth across from her. "It's been a while." Kim nodded, taking a moment to compose herself. She could still recall the night Simone had coaxed her with sweet words and laughter, all while Michael poured glass after glass of champagne. They'd turned a professional weekend into a twisted replay of university days, ignoring that Kim was married. The memory burned. "Simone," Kim said stiffly, forcing any warmth from her voice. "Thanks for coming." Simone placed her clasped hands on the table, her posture graceful but tense. "You sounded urgent on the phone. Is everything okay?" No, Kim thought. Nothing is okay. She glanced down at the tea in front of her, steam curling upwards in slow spirals. "I'm pregnant," she said plainly. Simone's eyes flickered to Kim's midsection and then back to Kim's face, confusion creasing her brow. "With Ben's child?" "Yes." Kim studied Simone's reaction carefully. "We did a test. It's his." Simone let out a breath that could have been relief or disappointment. "Well, that's good news, right? I'm happy for you." Kim tensed, her hands gripping the edges of the wooden table until her knuckles turned white. "I wish I could just celebrate it. But you know everything that happened. Because of that night with Michael, for weeks I wasn't even sure if Ben was the father." Simone's expression turned guarded, as though anticipating an attack. Kim, I told you before. I'm sorry for how things went down. I never meant, Kim interrupted, voice trembling with anger. You never meant for me to sleep with him? Then why'd you practically push me at Michael with all those drinks and reminders of our wild times? Why'd you keep telling me how amazing he was, how I needed to live a little? You knew exactly what you were doing. Simone bristled, but her gaze wavered. He asked about you, and I honestly thought you might enjoy it, just like old times. You were stressed about work. You were complaining about how you hardly ever saw Ben. I figured a little distraction wouldn't hurt. She sighed, lowering her eyes. But it got out of control. Kim leaned forward, her tone low but intense. You nearly destroyed my marriage, one I fought for in spite of my father's disapproval and all my own insecurities. Did you even care? Or did you just want to see if I'd slip back into those open relationship games you love? Simone's cheeks colored. She paused, then managed a quieter voice. Kim, I never intended to wreck your life. I thought you wanted an escape from the pressure, the illusions of a perfect marriage. Yes, I was selfish. I missed the connection we had back in college. I was also drawn to Michael, and it seemed so easy to bring you into that world. I never imagined it would go this far. Kim stared at Simone with a storm of anger and regret swirling in her chest. The cafe's warm atmosphere suddenly felt stifling. She took a moment, sipping her tea, letting the soothing mint calm her enough to keep from yelling. What I want now, she said in a measured tone, is for you to back out of my life entirely. No more calls, no more invites, no chance for Michael to show up out of nowhere. None of it. I'm done. Simone's eyes misted, and for a brief second, Kim felt the weight of their old friendship. They'd once been so close, painting together in a dimly lit studio, laughing until sunrise, sharing secrets about their fears and dreams. Simone started to say something, then hesitated. If that's what you need, I understand. Why now? Kim asked more softly. Why apologize only when everything collapsed? Simone's lips twitched with tension. At first I didn't realize how serious it was. I thought you'd keep it casual, or maybe you'd regret it but move on. Then you stopped answering my messages. I figured you needed space, so I stayed away, hoping you'd cool off and come around. A tear slipped down Simone's cheek, surprising Kim. I never wanted to hurt you, Kim. You were one of the only people I truly cared about. Kim's anger flickered. She believed Simone's tears were genuine but refused to let it sway her decision. Well, you did hurt me and almost cost me everything. Now I have to fix it on my own. She exhaled shakily. I'm fighting for my marriage and you need to respect that. Stay away from me, from Ben, from anything connected to our life. Simone looked devastated but nodded. You have my word. I won't contact you or him again. She sniffed and wiped her cheeks. I guess this is goodbye then? Kim stared at the woman who had once been her closest friend, a friend who had shown her acceptance and excitement in a time when her father's rules and society's expectations weighed heavily. Yet that same friend had also lured her into a reckless trap. The tragedy of it all hurt more than she could express. Yes, Kim said, voice barely above a whisper. I need this to be goodbye. They sat in thick silence for a beat, the cafe bustling around them, spoons clinking on porcelain cups, low chatter rolling across the tables. Finally, Simone stood, hesitated like she might reach for Kim's hand, then thought better of it. She turned and walked toward the door, her posture rigid, dignity intact except for the sadness etched into her features. Kim watched her go, heart pounding, not sure if she felt more relief or sorrow. Perhaps both. Releasing Simone meant releasing a big part of her past, the good memories, as well as the destructive chaos. She had no idea if it was the right decision or if it had hurt less tomorrow. But she knew one thing. Ben was her future, and she had to give their marriage every ounce of loyalty she had left. She finished her tea, the mint taste feeling strangely bitter now. On her way out, she fished out her phone, noticing a single text from Ben. Still in Ireland. Not sure when I'll be back yet. Hope you're taking care of yourself. Let's talk soon. She clutched the phone to her chest, letting out a shaky breath. The ball was in Ben's court now. Kim had done her part to sever ties with the toxic influence that contributed to her betrayal, but that didn't erase her own responsibility in what happened. She'd chosen to cross the line. Now she had to prove to Ben and to herself that she was worthy of trust again. As she stepped out into the crisp autumn sunshine, Kim felt the baby flutter slightly inside her. For the first time in weeks, her heart lifted with a faint sense of promise. I'm fighting for us, she thought, envisioning Ben's brown eyes and warm smile, imagining a future where they could hold their child together without bitterness poisoning every kiss and every glance. She headed home to call her mother, planning to explain that yes, the baby was definitely Ben's. Kim knew her father would eventually learn about all this drama, but she no longer cared for his controlling opinions. She was determined to do things her way, whatever it took. Walking away from the cafe, Kim felt a pang of loss for Simone. But as the wind rustled leaves along the pavement, scattering them toward the river, she realized sometimes you needed to let the past drift away to protect the life you truly wanted. A week after the DNA results, the Irish countryside had settled into a late autumn gloom. Heavy clouds pressed down on the valley, and a steady drizzle made everything slippery footpaths, stone walls, even the mood of the restoration crew, who seemed to trudge more than walk. For Ben, the days blurred into a grind of manual labor and restless nights. He'd speak to Kim briefly every couple of days, but their conversations stayed guarded, overshadowed by uncertain emotions. The knowledge of the baby's paternity was a relief, yet he felt lost on the path to forgiveness. He was carrying a stack of lumber toward the main gatehouse when he saw an older man with salt and pepper hair drive up in a muddy Land Rover. The man hopped out, greeting the crew with a hearty wave. Ben recognized him as Connor McGrath, a well-respected stonemason who occasionally consulted on trickier restoration projects. Connor approached, his steps sure despite the rain-soaked ground. Ben, right? Dave told me you're the new hotshot architectural intern from across the pond. Ben let out a short laugh, though his cheeks warmed. Hotshot might be pushing it. Connor's eyes sparkled. Well, you've impressed the foreman. He said you have an eye for detail and a steady hand with stone. Not easy to come by. Ben shrugged. I do my best. Connor gave him a curious once-over. Dave also said you've been preoccupied lately. Want to talk about it? Ben hesitated. Something about Connor's fatherly demeanor felt safe, but the last thing he wanted was more pity. Still, he'd seen Connor chat and joke with the entire team, always with an open ear. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to get a bit of an outsider's perspective. They ended up walking to a small stone shed near the orchard, where extra materials were stored. The roof provided some shelter from the drizzle. Ben set down the lumber with a grunt. Long story short, he began, my wife and I are going through some major trust issues. She's pregnant, and I only recently found out the baby's definitely mine. Connor let out a low whistle. That's a doozy. Congratulations and condolences all at once. Ben gave a wry smile. That about sums it up. I'm angry. I feel betrayed. But I also don't want to lose my family. Every time I think about stepping back, I imagine that kid's eyes looking up at me. He exhaled shakily. It's messing with my head. Connor leaned against the shed's damp wall. I've been married 33 years. The best advice I can give is this. Don't make decisions in the heat of anger. Sometimes we do the worst damage when we're hurting the most. He frowned, as if remembering something painful. I nearly lost my wife a decade ago because I got too wrapped up in a buddy's bar-hopping lifestyle. I'd come home late, too drunk to see straight. We never physically cheated on each other, but trust me, I broke her heart in 100 little ways. It took a long time to rebuild her faith in me. Ben rubbed his palms together, the cold biting at his fingertips. How'd you earn her trust back? Connor paused, looking at the shifting gray sky. I had to swallow my pride and really, truly listen. Acknowledge the hurt. Let her vent, cry, scream if she had to. I also had to prove, day by day, that she mattered to me more than my own vices. Over time, she believed me again. He placed a hand on Ben's shoulder. If you love her, and you believe she loves you, you'll find a way. Ben swallowed hard, nodding. Thanks, he managed, though his voice cracked. The notion of letting Kim scream at him for all the insecurities he'd hidden, of looking her in the eye without resentment, felt daunting, but maybe it was the only way forward. Connor's phone buzzed, and he excused himself with a wink. "We'll talk more later, son." That evening, Ben returned to the trailer soaked from rain, half frozen from the wind. He peeled off his jacket and sat by the small electric heater, letting the warmth soothe his aching muscles. Dave wasn't around, probably grabbing a pint at the local pub. The hum of the heater filled the silence. After a few minutes, he grabbed his phone. He noticed an unread email from Kim. Taking a breath, he opened it. Subject: "Where we stand, Ben. I've cut ties with Simone." Completely. She was a big part of what happened, and I won't let her or anyone like her come between us again. It doesn't excuse my actions, but I want you to know I'm serious about changing. I'm also meeting with my parents soon. My father will freak out, as usual, but I'm done letting him shape my life. This is our marriage, our baby. I want you to understand how sorry I am. I'll spend every day proving it if you let me. But I know it's your choice if you want to try again. Please come home when you're ready. I love you. Kim. He reread the email twice, noticing the raw determination in her words. She'd gotten rid of Simone. He believed that must have been hard for her. Simone had once been a close friend, and they had history that predated Ben. Yet Kim had severed that tie. For me? He wondered. Or maybe more accurately, for us. He realized he was trembling, tears unexpectedly hot in his eyes. Maybe Connor was right. Maybe Kim was just as broken up about this as he was, willing to do the heavy lifting to fix it. But was he? After a restless sleep, he woke before dawn, lying awake on the stiff mattress while the wind rattled the thin trailer walls. Finally, he decided he'd had enough. He'd come here to get space, but all that distance had only confirmed he couldn't bury the pain. He needed a real conversation with Kim, face-to-face, not half-baked phone calls or cryptic emails. Resolved, he made arrangements to leave in a couple of days, just enough time to tie up the immediate tasks at the site and not leave the crew in a bind. On his last evening in Ireland, a soft drizzle fell as Ben stood by the orchard wall he'd been helping to restore. The job was half done, but progress was decent enough that the team could manage without him for a while. Raindrops dotted his hair and trickled down the back of his neck. He placed his hand on the newly laid stones. Each block represented hours of labor, each crack carefully filled, each piece fitted to the next. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. Sometimes you had to rebuild from the ground up. He thought of Kim's email, the heartbreak in her voice on the phone, and the flutter of life growing inside her. A child that was his. No matter how complicated things got, a part of him wanted to protect that little life and see if he and Kim could truly mend. Stone by stone, he thought, we can fix what's broken. The next morning, a swirl of mist covered the airport runway in Dublin as Ben waited to board his flight. The rolling Irish hills faded into a pale, foggy horizon. He clutched his carry-on and took one last look at the land that had given him time to think. Then he stepped onto the plane. During the flight, he gazed out the window at silver-gray clouds. His stomach churned not from fear of flying, but from the weight of returning to a marriage he wasn't sure he could salvage. Yet hope flickered inside him like a small candle in a dark room. He pictured Kim's face the day they bought their cottage, how she laughed and hugged him, confident in the life they were building. He wanted that again, for himself, for her, for their child. When the plane touched down, Ben felt a lump in his throat. He switched on his phone, half expecting a text from Kim. Instead, he saw a simple message. "Let me know when you land safely." He texted back, "Just landed, heading home soon. We'll talk." He still needed to grab a rental car and drive a few hours. During that drive, clouds hung low, threatening rain. His mind raced, flipping through every possible scenario. Kim bursting into tears, him losing his temper, them hugging and making heartfelt promises. By the time he reached the outskirts of their village, his chest was tight with anxiety. Outside their small cottage, he parked on the gravel, noticing the rose bush near the front gate had started to wither in the cold. The lights were on inside, glowing warmly through the windows. He felt an ache in his chest, remembering how proud he and Kim had been to own this place. Every squeaky floorboard, every chipped corner of the kitchen tile was part of their home. He took a shaky breath, stepped out of the car, and walked to the front door. Before he could knock, it opened. Kim stood there, eyes red-rimmed, hair slightly disheveled as if she'd been pacing for hours. She wore a loose sweater that hinted at her changing figure. For a moment, neither spoke. Ben felt tears threatening. Kim, lips quivering, finally whispered, "Hi." He tried to greet her back, but found the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he slowly placed his hand on her shoulder, and she let out a quiet sob, stepping toward him. The warm smell of her hair, the familiar curve of her shoulder beneath his palm, it cut through the bitterness, reminding him of every reason he had ever loved her. They stood there in the doorway for what felt like a lifetime, locked in a trembling hug that said more than words could manage. The world beyond their front porch faded. No Ireland, no Switzerland, no past lovers, no interfering parents, just Ben and Kim, trying to salvage a bond that had nearly slipped away. Eventually, she pulled back, her tear-streaked face shining with a fragile hope. "Thank you for coming home," she said. Ben nodded. We have a lot to talk about." "I know," Kim murmured, wiping her cheeks. "Let's figure it out, one step at a time." He took her hand, and together they stepped inside. As the door closed, Ben felt a mixture of dread and relief, fear and longing. But beneath it all was a kernel of faith that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild from the rubble. Just like restoring an old manor's weathered stones, it would require patience, honesty, and a willingness to face every crack and fracture hidden. For the first time in a long time, Ben's heart felt something close to hope. Ben woke the next morning to a thin ray of sunlight peeking through the drawn bedroom curtains. That single beam reminded him how long it had been since he'd slept in this bed with Kim. The sheets felt unfamiliar, even though the same floral comforter still topped the mattress. A faint smell of lavender lingered Kim's scent, one he used to find comforting. Now it made his chest tighten with a rush of conflicting emotions. He stretched slowly and noted Kim was already up. The house was quiet except for the slow creaking of old wood and the faint purr of the furnace kicking on. His thoughts lingered on the conversation from the night before, the tremble in Kim's voice, the worn-out ache in her eyes. They'd talked for hours in the living room, sharing tears and half-formed promises. A part of Ben wanted to bury his anger and just hold her. But trust, once shattered, doesn't magically snap back into place overnight. He slipped on a worn t-shirt and jeans, then headed downstairs. The cottage's narrow staircase seemed steeper than he remembered. At the bottom, he paused, noticing Kim in the small dining nook. Morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating her pale hair and soft features. She was bent over a collection of baby items, tiny shoes, miniature sweaters arranged on the table. Kim looked up, startled for a moment. Then relief washed over her features. "Good morning," she said quietly. Ben cleared his throat. "Morning." A pot of coffee hissed on the counter. He could tell she'd been up for a while, possibly unable to sleep. His gaze drifted to the baby items. "Didn't realize you'd already started getting supplies," he mumbled, feeling a strange tug in his chest at the sight of those tiny clothes. Kim offered a tentative smile. "I ordered some things a few weeks ago, hoping we'd be picking them out together. They arrived sooner than expected, so I was just trying to see what we still need." He stepped closer, gingerly picking up a pair of impossibly small socks. For a moment, neither spoke, both lost in the shared awe and anxiety of impending parenthood. Then Kim sighed and set aside a rattle shaped like a teddy bear. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling a bit. "I feel like I say that every 5 minutes, but—" "Stop," Ben interrupted, swallowing hard. "I know, I believe you're sorry. And He paused, the words getting stuck. He exhaled. "I want to find a way through this, but I don't know how to let go of all the images in my head." Kim's eyes shone with tears. "I understand." She rested a hand on her growing stomach. "Ben, I can't erase what happened. I wish I could, but I can try to make things right every day, if you'll let me." He met her gaze. The baby socks slipped from his fingers and fell softly onto the table. "I came back because I realized I can't just run forever. You're pregnant with our child. I love you, as much as it hurts to admit right now." She stepped closer. Her voice was steady, though tears threatened to spill. "I don't want to make empty promises. All I can say is, I'm committed to us. I cut off contact with Simone and anyone else who ever encouraged me to stray. I'm... She halted, trembling. I'm even thinking about leaving my job. Ben lifted an eyebrow. Your job? But you've worked so hard to get there, didn't you just go to Zurich for a big project? Kim's lips twitched with a grim smile. I know. It's been my dream for years to work in the art auction world. But all that travel, that freedom to just pick up and go, I don't think it's right anymore. Not for us, not for this baby. And frankly, I don't trust myself if I keep living in that fast-paced circle of business dinners, late-night auctions, and socializing with wealthy clients. Ben studied her face. He recalled the nights he'd spent alone, wondering which city Kim was in, who she might meet for drinks after a sale. Was that part of the problem all along? He inhaled slowly. What are you planning to do instead? Kim shrugged, eyes downcast. I've been looking into some options. A friend of mine is an art professor at the local university. She said there might be an opening for a part-time lecturer in art history. It'd pay less, but it'd keep me here, close to you and the baby. Ben felt a knot loosen in his chest. It was one thing for Kim to say she was sorry. It was another to hear she was actually rearranging her life. But he also felt a pang of guilt. I don't want you to give up your dreams just because... She lifted a hand, stopping him. I'm not giving up on art. I'll still be working with it, but in a more settled way. Right now, my priority is salvaging our marriage and being a good mother. If I have to trade in my seat on a plane for a seat in a classroom, that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Silence settled between them for a moment. The only sound was the gentle drip of the coffee maker. Finally, Ben stepped over to Kim, placed his hands carefully on her shoulders, and looked into her eyes. I want to forgive you, he said, voice shaking. And I want us to be a family. But you have to understand it'll take time for me to truly move past this. Tears slipped down Kim's cheeks as she nodded. I'm ready to do whatever it takes, one day at a time, whatever pace you need. He wiped a tear from her face with his thumb. Then let's try. We'll figure it out. They leaned into each other, foreheads touching, sharing a quiet moment of fragile reconciliation. Outside, a bird chirped on the windowsill, as though welcoming a new start to their complicated life. That evening, they prepared dinner together, a rare domestic ritual they hadn't practiced in months. Ben chopped vegetables while Kim stirred a pot of soup on the stove. The rhythmic clank of knives on the cutting board and the simmering bubbles provided a soothing backdrop. At one point, Kim let out a soft laugh. Remember when we first moved in and you nearly burned down the kitchen trying to make steak? Ben smirked. I was trying to impress you. Turns out high heat isn't always the answer. She laughed again, the sound bittersweet. That memory of simpler times tasted like honey and regret. He set the knife down and turned to her. We can't undo the past, Kim, but I want to build something better now. She nodded, eyes shining. So do I. It wasn't a grand declaration of forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. They sat together at the small wooden dining table, sharing soup and quiet conversation. The tension still lingered. Memories don't just vanish, but each spoonful seemed to warm their hearts just a bit more. The next few weeks spun by in a blur of small triumphs and stumbling blocks, each day a test of whether Ben and Kim's renewed commitment could truly hold. True to her word, Kim announced her resignation at the auction house. Although her boss was shocked and borderline outraged, Kim calmly explained that she needed a lifestyle change. She pointed to her pregnancy as the main factor, but she didn't bother detailing the messy personal reasons. They let her go with a half-hearted promise to keep a place open for her if she ever decided to return. In the meantime, she took up a part-time lecturing gig at the local university. On her first day, she wore a simple black blazer and blouse, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked professional, yet she carried a glow of cautious excitement. Wish me luck, she murmured to Ben before walking into the campus building. He squeezed her hand, heart brimming with a mix of pride and lingering wariness. Back at home, Ben returned to work at his architectural firm, mostly focusing on local restoration projects, so he could be near Kim. The Ireland job had taught him that distance wasn't always the best solution. Yet balancing trust with the scars of betrayal was no easy feat. In quiet moments, he'd catch himself replaying old doubts. especially on nights Kim stayed late grading papers or prepping lectures. But she was transparent about her schedule, texting him updates, inviting him to campus events. Slowly, step by step, trust began to regrow, like fresh grass pushing through the cracks of a charred field. Facing father-in-law trouble. One crisp afternoon, Kim's father decided to pay them an unexpected visit. Ben looked up from a set of medieval church blueprints spread across the dining table when he heard a firm knock on the front door. Kim, half asleep on the couch after a day of lectures, jolted awake. "That's Dad," she said, eyes widening. "He told me he might drop by." Ben exchanged a wary glance with her. In the past, Roger, her father, had been a looming figure, always trying to meddle in their affairs. It was no secret he'd once had hopes that Kim would marry Martin, an old family friend. Kim stood, smoothing her blouse, and opened the door. Roger breezed in, his expression a tight-lipped mix of concern and disapproval. He wore a tailored coat that screamed money, and his gray hair was styled back in a way that accentuated his stern jawline. "Dad," Kim greeted with forced warmth. "Kimberly," Roger said shortly. He didn't bother taking off his coat as he marched inside, scanning the living room like an appraiser sizing up a mediocre painting. His gaze stopped on Ben. "Ben," Roger acknowledged stiffly. Ben forced a polite nod. "Mr. Harris." Roger turned back to Kim. "I'm concerned. You're leaving a prestigious auction house job? To what, teach local kids about brushstrokes? Not to mention the rumors flying around about you traveling with all sorts of friends." Kim's shoulders tensed. "Dad, enough. I'm done with that career, yes. It's my decision." "Is it really your decision?" Roger asked, casting a pointed glance at Ben. "Or did this man talk you into it?" Ben stiffened, anger flooding his chest. But Kim stepped forward, her voice calm and resolute. "Ben didn't force me to do anything, Dad. I chose this, and I'd appreciate it if you respected my life choices. I'm not your little girl anymore." Roger's jaw tightened. "You could do better. This place—" He glanced around the cozy but modest cottage, the peeling paint in the hallway, the clutter of baby items on the coffee table. "You're my daughter. You deserve a home worthy of that." Kim's eyes flashed. "I have a home, right here with Ben. We're starting a family, and it's not your business to decide if it's worthy or not." Roger pressed his lips into a thin line, but Kim forged ahead. "I know you wanted me to be with Martin or someone you thought acceptable, but that's not how life works. I love Ben, and I'm carrying his child. We're building a life together, one that might not match your perfect standards, but it's ours." Ben watched with a surge of pride at Kim's firm stance. She had always been strong, but seeing her confront her father like this was new. There was no tremble in her voice, no second guessing. He could almost feel the shift, like a boundary being firmly placed between them and the overbearing man who used to run the show. Roger cleared his throat. "I just want to ensure you're taken care of. You know how precarious finances can be, especially when a baby comes." Kim softened slightly, but her tone remained unwavering. "We'll manage. This is our family, Dad. We'll figure it out. You can either support us or step aside." A tense silence hung in the air. Finally, Roger let out a resigned sigh. "Fine. I see you're determined. I just hope you know what you're doing." Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out, leaving Kim to shut the door behind him. She slumped against it, exhaling shakily. Ben approached, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "That was tough," he murmured. She nodded. "But it needed to be said. I'm not letting him or anyone derail what we're trying to rebuild." Ben wrapped his arms around her. For the first time in a while, he felt a true sense of partnership, a bond strong enough to face whatever storms might come. Redefining their life. Over the next few weeks, Kim settled into her part-time teaching role. Ben watched her come alive in a new way, spending hours crafting lectures about Renaissance painters or guiding students through the complexities of art history. She'd beam when a student finally grasped a concept, or when she discovered a hidden gem in the campus archives to share in class. Meanwhile, Ben worked shorter hours at the firm, focusing on local renovations. Their weekends became a new ritual of them tackling little house projects together, painting the nursery, rearranging furniture, or browsing yard sales for antique decor. They had arguments, of course. Some nights, old resentments would flare up, usually triggered by small things. A stray mention of Kim's travels or Ben's hesitation when she suggested a weekend getaway. But they learned to talk it through, no matter how raw it felt. Kim would say, "I know you're scared, I get that. I just need you to tell me when you feel uneasy so I can help." And Ben would try, though it sometimes came out clumsy or too harsh. "It's just, I don't want to imagine you in a hotel room with someone else. I'm sorry. I know it hurts you too." They navigated these moments like travelers in uncharted territory, carefully, one emotional minefield at a time. Gradually, trust grew stronger. They both discovered that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but a crucial step toward real healing. Months slid by, bringing the final weeks of Kim's pregnancy. Autumn gave way to a chilly winter, then winter melted into a brisk, rainy spring. With each seasonal shift, the baby grew, and so did the closeness that Ben and Kim had painstakingly nurtured. Ben remembered the day Kim's water broke with startling clarity. It was early morning, the sky still dark, and rain lashed at the windows. Kim shook him awake, her voice trembling with excitement and nerves. "Ben, my water just broke." They rushed to the hospital, hearts pounding. The journey felt surreal streetlights blurred by the downpour, reflecting on wet pavement in golden streaks. For a moment, Ben's chest squeezed with old anxieties, but he gripped Kim's hand and told himself this wasn't a time for fear. It was a time to show up for his wife and child. Hours later, the baby, a bright-eyed girl, entered the world with a piercing wail that brought tears to both parents' eyes. The delivery room lights seemed haloed in that instant, as if time paused to acknowledge the magnitude of their new beginning. Kim was exhausted and glowing, sweaty strands of her near-white hair clinging to her face. Ben felt an indescribable surge of love, not just for the tiny, squirming infant, but also for the woman who'd faced her mistakes, fought for their marriage, and now lay breathless but triumphant on that hospital bed. "She's perfect," Kim whispered, her eyes heavy with tears and wonder. Ben gently touched the baby's hand, swallowing a lump in his throat. "Yeah," he said, voice quivering. "She really is." They named her Evelyn Evie for short. Bringing her home felt like a milestone that eclipsed all the chaos of the past year. The quiet cottage now pulsed with new life. Midnight feedings, soft lullabies, and the occasional meltdown as they figured out how to soothe a fussy infant. There was chaos in the routine, the stench of diapers in the pail, the constant cycle of bottles to wash, but also a sweetness so profound it made Ben's chest tighten with gratitude. Even at 3 a.m. when Evie cried for the 5th time, he'd find himself rocking her in the nursery, gazing at her tiny face, and remembering how close he'd come to losing this future. Kim often joined him, half asleep but smiling. They'd share hushed conversations about how different life looked now. Neither of them missed the high-flying city nights or the endless business trips. This, right here, felt more real and valuable than any fancy art deal or high-profile restoration job. A visit from Kim's parents. About a month after Evie was born, Kim's parents dropped by again this time with a much gentler approach. Her mother, a petite woman with a soft voice, cooed over the baby and offered to help around the kitchen. Roger hovered awkwardly in the background, clearing his throat, as though he wasn't sure how to act now that his daughter had defied him and come out happier for it. Eventually, Roger found his way to Ben, who stood by the living room window, bouncing Evie lightly in his arms. The older man watched them quietly. "You seem more settled," Roger said, his tone hesitant. Ben gently adjusted Evie's blanket, feeling her sweet weight against his chest. "I am?" Roger nodded, looking around at the neatly arranged baby toys, the framed pictures of Ben and Kim from the baby shower, and the letterboard on the wall that read, "Welcome home, Evie." "I worried," Roger admitted softly, "that she was throwing her life away leaving that job, but I see how happy she is, how happy you both are with this little one." He paused, his voice gruff. "I guess I was wrong about a lot of things." Ben's chest tightened. This was probably as close to an apology as Roger would get. "We're doing okay," Ben answered carefully. "Better than okay, actually." Roger cleared his throat again. "If either of you need anything financial help, advice, just say the word." Ben managed a small smile. "Thank you. We'll keep that in mind." And that was enough for now. No grand gestures. No dramatic apologies. Just a subtle acknowledgement that perhaps they could all move forward, a family in its own imperfect way. Sunlit afternoons, weeks, turned into months, and suddenly summer arrived. Warm breezes rustled the rosebush by the cottage gate, the same one that once looked withered. Now it thrived, pink blooms bursting with life. On a mild Saturday afternoon, Ben and Kim lounged in the backyard under the shade of a large oak tree. Evie, now a few months old, dozed peacefully in her bassinet, occasionally blinking her bright eyes at the dancing sunlight. Kim sipped iced tea, her hair braided loosely over one shoulder. She looked at Ben, eyes reflecting contentment and lingering traces of all they'd weathered. "Remember when we couldn't have a conversation without tiptoeing around each other?" Ben chuckled wryly, glancing at Evie. "Feels like a lifetime ago. In a way, I guess it was." Kim reached over to squeeze his hand. "We made it through, though, and now I can't imagine life any other way. Teaching has been surprisingly fulfilling. Some of my students show real promise. And being home with you and Evie every night," she trailed off, emotion catching in her throat. "It's the happiest I've ever been." Ben exhaled softly. He remembered the hollowness he once carried, the fear that Kim's betrayal would haunt him forever. He wouldn't say it was gone, but it had softened, like an old scar that no longer stings. "I used to think I wasn't good enough for you," he admitted. "That one day you'd wake up and realize you deserve somebody I don't know, richer or more charming." Kim frowned, sliding closer so her knee touched his. "Ben, don't you get it by now? I never wanted any of that. The only thing that matters is how we support each other, forgive each other, and choose each other. Every single day." He met her gaze. "I'm finally starting to understand." Their hands stayed joined, a simple act that held years of struggle and reconciliation. Nearby, Evie fussed softly, and Kim leaned over to soothe her. Ben watched them, the mother of his child, the child who was the proof of both their mistakes and their redemption, and felt a wave of quiet joy. In that backyard, with sunlight filtering through the oak leaves, it struck him how far they'd come. They weren't perfect, and shadows of the past still lingered if he let his mind wander too long. But every time he looked at Kim, he saw a woman who had fought her own demons, who had chosen him, and who wanted this family as much as he did. And every time Kim looked at Ben, she saw the man who had loved her even when she'd felt unworthy, the one who had wrestled with his insecurities yet still showed up. He stayed, forgave, and built a new kind of trust, one tested by fire, but stronger because of it. They didn't need lavish parties or applause. They only needed each other and the gentle laughter that echoed in the yard. In a world full of noise and endless demands, they found a quiet corner of happiness. A small cottage, a blossoming rosebush, a child's peaceful breath, and two people who dared to forgive and love again.